A cold wind sweeps across the dimly lit chamber, carrying the smell of old parchment and extinguished candles. An elderly mapmaker, hands trembling with age but steady with purpose, bends over his wooden desk. The year is 1314. Outside, bells toll faintly from a distant monastery. But inside, only the soft rasp of quill on parchment breaks the silence. His ink-stained fingers move with a quiet urgency as he traces a thin line stretching from the coast of France toward the interior of the continent. It is a road that official records claim does not exist. A road that no king, no bishop, no tax collector has ever acknowledged. A road walked only by one outlawed brotherhood whose name now hangs in whispers, if spoken at all. The mapmaker pauses, glancing over his shoulder, half expecting armored boots to thunder through the door. After all, it has only been weeks since the order of the temple was extinguished in fire and fear, its leaders tortured into confessions, its secrets demanded by a crown desperate for gold. The king believes he has silenced them forever. But as the mapmaker dips his quill again, he knows something the king does not. The Templars did not rely on castles or treasuries or armies for their power. Their strength lay in these lines, veins and arteries that stitched together the very fabric of medieval Europe. And though the men who walked them now scatter like dust in the wind, the roads themselves endure. He draws the next segment slowly, carefully, following a memory he has carried for decades. A forest path in Burgundy that twists just enough to avoid the watchposts of a feudal lord. A bridge repaired in secret one winter, its stones marked with symbols invisible to the untrained eye. A monastery where the brothers never slept at the same hour twice, rotating their vigils to protect an archive hidden beneath the floor. These are not simply roads. They are the bones of a network that defied borders, kings, and time itself. A network that moved not only knights and horses, but messages, relics, gold, and whispers of knowledge considered too dangerous for the world. As he sketches, a strange thought flickers through his mind. A question that has haunted many since the arrests. How did the Templars vanish so swiftly? How did entire groups disappear the very night soldiers arrived at their doors? How did ships slip away from harbors believed to be sealed? How could a vast, public military order simply melt into the countryside without leaving bodies behind? He knows the answer lies in the very lines he is drawing. These unrecorded routes, hidden in plain sight, had existed for centuries under the feet of ordinary travelers who never realized the precision with which they were designed. Each bend, each clearing, each river crossing was part of a larger pattern, a web that allowed movement with astonishing speed. To the untrained eye, they were nothing but muddy trails or shepherd paths. To the Templars, they were escape lines, supply arteries, and the invisible highways of a Europe more connected than historians admit. A log shifts in the hearth and the mapmaker flinches, steadying his breath. He knows he is committing a dangerous act. Possessing Templar documents is now a crime, punishable by death. But he cannot bring himself to destroy the knowledge entrusted to him long ago. He had once walked these roads as a young man, delivering coded letters between commanderies. He remembers the feel of those journeys, the tension of moving under moonlight, the certainty that somewhere unseen, others watched the same roads, ready to intervene if he fell. He remembers the sense of belonging, of walking a world that felt larger and more connected than the kingdoms that claimed to rule it. Now, decades later, with the order dissolved, the old network haunts him like a ghost. He has watched as kings debate spoils, as the church rewrites history, as rumors spread of treasures, relics, and unspeakable secrets hidden away. Everyone searches for gold. No one searches for what truly mattered, the routes themselves. The lines he draws tonight are fragments of a forgotten skeleton, but together they form something unsettling, an intelligent system centuries ahead of its time. He dips the quill again, the ink pooling dark and heavy on the parchment. His hand drifts to a section near the Mediterranean coast, where routes converge suspiciously close to ports known for Templar fleets. He remembers the sailors, the nights when cargo was loaded without lanterns, the chance carried by the tide. Some claim the Templars fled by sea when the arrests began. Others insist they vanished into forests. But the mapmaker knows both theories miss the truth. The routes were made to vanish with their travelers. They were crafted not for conquest, but for disappearance. Outside, thunder rolls in the distance. He feels a momentary pulse of fear. Perhaps soldiers really are coming this time. Perhaps he is a fool for preserving these lines, for honoring a brotherhood that no longer exists. But then he thinks of the question that has gnawed at him since that terrible night. What secret could have frightened a king enough to erase an order admired across the world? What knowledge could have made such routes necessary? He stops drawing. The quill hovers above the parchment. And for a moment he listens to the storm, to the silence, to the heartbeat of the map itself. These lines, he realizes, tell a story more dangerous than any treasure. They reveal the truth of a Europe shaped by unseen hands, connected by invisible roads, moved by people who understood that knowledge, once carried, cannot be contained. He stands slowly, rolling the parchment with deliberate care. The ink is still drying, the storm still building, the danger still real. Yet he feels no regret. Someone must preserve these routes, even if no one else believes in them. Someone must remember how the world was once navigated in shadows. Because the Templars may have vanished, but their roads never did. They were not born as warriors, nor as the guardians of Europe's most protected caravans. In the beginning, the Knights of the Temple were simply 9 men, humble, determined, and painfully aware of how vulnerable pilgrims were on the long roads to Jerusalem. They had no castles, no armies, no wealth. Their early days were defined by scarcity. Frayed cloaks, battered horses, vows of poverty taken so literally that 2 knights were said to share a single mount. Yet even in those lean years, they possessed something far more valuable than gold. An understanding that survival depended on movement. Swift, coordinated, intelligent movement across a world fractured by war and faith. It is easy to imagine them in those early months, standing at the foot of the Temple Mount, speaking quietly among themselves, calculating the roads ahead. The Crusader kingdoms were young, fragile, and surrounded by uncertainty. Every valley, every pass, every oasis held danger. The Templars quickly learned that brute force alone could not protect the thousands of travelers pouring into the Holy Land. Battles won glory, but logistics won survival. And so, they became students of the land, reading the terrain like scripture, memorizing the bends of rivers, the rise of hills, the sheltered passes where a lone rider could hide for hours if ambushed. This was the birth of their true genius. Long before they built fortresses or fleets, they built knowledge. They cataloged distances, tested old Roman roads, studied the habits of raiders, and mapped paths that had never been written down. Every patrol, every escort mission, every supply run became a chance to refine routes, shorten travel times, predict danger before it appeared. What others saw as wilderness, the Templars treated as a living grid, an interconnected landscape that they could navigate with uncanny precision. As their reputation grew, so did their responsibilities. Kings and nobles entrusted them with caravans carrying grain, tools, sacred relics, and sometimes secrets too risky to write in letters. Pilgrims trusted them with their lives. Local guides whispered their observations to them. Turns in the desert where fresh water lay buried, narrow passes that became deadly when the wind shifted, hidden glens where raiders waited. Piece by piece, the Templars wove these fragments into an invisible net of knowledge. And the brothers learned quickly that survival was not only about defending roads, but about creating alternatives. Shadow paths known only to them. A direct route between 2 major cities might be watched by bandits, so they carved a quieter way through hills. A trade route might be taxed by a greedy lord, so they built a parallel trail hidden behind woodland ridges. These hidden paths became their lifelines, secret arteries that allowed them to appear where danger was greatest and disappear before enemies even realized they had passed. Their discipline transformed them. They rode with a precision unmatched by any other force of the age. A Templar patrol could travel faster, survive longer, and adapt quicker than typical medieval armies. Their training blended monastic rigor with military pragmatism. They woke before dawn, studied maps in candlelight, drilled in formations, and rehearsed movements that relied on every brother understanding not just the battlefield, but the land beneath his feet. Over time, this mastery of terrain became an identity. While others saw themselves as knights of kingdoms or soldiers of particular lords, the Templars saw themselves as guardians of movement, custodians of Europe's and the Holy Land's arteries. Their vow of poverty ironically strengthened this identity. With no estates to weigh them down, no families demanding allegiance, no political obligations to distract them, they became living extensions of the road itself. Their loyalty was to the mission, not to territory. The landscape, not the throne, guided them. When they returned to Europe, this habit of disciplined travel shaped the way they built their network. They chose locations based on water access, visibility, distance to trade routes, and proximity to hidden paths known only to their brothers. A commandery was never placed randomly. It was placed like a crucial joint in a greater skeleton. The brothers knew how far a horse could run before needing rest, how long food would last between safe houses, which forests swallowed travelers whole, and which valleys echoed the sound of enemy approach. Their routes were designed to be predictable to themselves, but unpredictable to everyone else. Travelers might see a well-kept road leading from one Templar house to another, but the brothers always had a second route, quieter and more secure, used only when secrecy mattered. They learned to disappear behind hills, use forests as shields, and move from river to river with the ease of men following a script. What made them feared was not simply their swords, but their ability to arrive at the right place at the right time, often impossibly fast. Stories spread of Templar reinforcements appearing hours after distress signals, of supply wagons emerging from mountain passes that no map acknowledged, of messages delivered across impossible distances in days instead of weeks. Their enemies called it witchcraft. Their allies called it providence. In truth, it was neither. It was mastery, the culmination of decades of studying land, weather, habits of men, and rhythms of nature. This mastery traveled with them wherever they went. Whether escorting pilgrims through the Holy Land, transferring gold across France, or guarding relics in Portugal, their reputation followed. Calm, precise, efficient, unshakable. They were not just soldiers. They were the spine of a hidden logistical system that would one day span continents. And in time, the world would learn a haunting truth, one that their enemies discovered too late. A Templar was never truly alone. Behind each brother stood 100 roads, 1,000 hidden places, and a network that stretched farther than any king's imagination. Even as kingdoms rose and fell, the Templars moved like shadows across Europe, leaving no footprints where others would have left armies. Their swords earned them fear. Their vows earned them respect. But their roads, those invisible, perfectly crafted routes, earned them power that no one could see until it was already too late. Europe before the rise of the Templars was not the solid, stable world the textbooks often describe. It was a landscape caught in slow collapse, an uneasy crossroads where empires faded, kingdoms fractured, and belief systems collided with a force that reshaped entire continents. To understand why the Knights of the Temple evolved into masters of movement, logistics, and hidden routes, one must step into this trembling world where nothing was certain, and everything depended on who controlled the roads. In the centuries leading to the First Crusade, Europe was a patchwork of ambitions. The Byzantine Empire struggled to hold back enemies on multiple fronts, its borders shrinking like a tightened fist. The Islamic world, although culturally flourishing, was deeply divided by rival caliphates and regional powers. Western Europe itself was scarcely more organized. Dukes and barons ruled their territories like private kingdoms, each with their own taxes, their own armies, their own grudges. Ordinary people, who simply wished to work, farm, and worship in peace, found themselves pinned between competing authorities. Travel was dangerous. Not metaphorically dangerous, literally, brutally, unpredictably deadly. Bandits roamed forest paths with impunity, especially those stretches where no lord claimed responsibility for keeping the peace. Roads could vanish beneath seasonal floods or be blocked by armies marching toward battles no one understood. A traveler might be robbed in one territory, fined in the next, and conscripted into a war in the territory after that. Even merchants, who depended on trade for survival, moved in nervous caravans, praying that the next turn in the road wouldn't reveal an ambush. Yet amid this chaos, something powerful stirred: long-distance pilgrimage. Thousands of Christians began traveling to Jerusalem, believing that walking the roads of the Holy Land brought them closer to salvation. These were not warriors or nobles. They were farmers, widows, artisans, young men seeking absolution, old men fearing judgment. They set out with hope in their hearts, only to confront a world that did not care about their faith or their innocence. Many disappeared along the way, swallowed by deserts, mountains, and the knives of raiders. When Jerusalem fell to the Crusaders in 1099, Western Europe did not suddenly become safer. Instead, the victory ignited new waves of movement. Pilgrims surged toward the Holy Land in numbers never seen before. Traders followed, seeking to profit from the new connections between East and West. Kings and nobles saw an opportunity to strengthen their influence by supporting military orders that could stabilize the pathways between these two worlds. But stabilizing roads in a world this unstable was no small order. It required more than fighters. It required intelligence, observation, and understanding of landscapes across thousands of miles. The Crusader states themselves were fragile experiments, thin strips of territory held by a minority of European settlers surrounded by shifting alliances and veteran armies. A castle could fall in a single night. A supply route could be severed by a single ambush. Winter floods could isolate entire towns. In this volatile environment, the ability to move men and materials efficiently meant the difference between survival and collapse. The early Templars recognized this better than anyone. They saw that the Holy Land was not a static battlefield. It was a living organism whose arteries and veins were the roads, mountain passes, coastal pathways, and desert trails. And the lifeblood flowing through those arteries were the pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, and supplies that kept the Crusader states alive. While kings and nobles focused on territory, the Templars focused on corridors, routes that crossed multiple jurisdictions, linked distant ports, and threaded through valleys where even experienced warriors hesitated. They learned to read the politics of geography, which tribe controlled a valley at certain times of year, which warlord tolerated Christian caravans, which local guides could be trusted, which wells would run dry in summer. They developed their own intelligence networks, gathering information from shepherds, sailors, desert nomads, and monastic communities who had observed the land for generations. This era also saw the rise of an unexpected force: merchant republics like Venice and Genoa. These cities were not empires in the traditional sense. They were economic powerhouses that relied on long-distance trade routes and maritime dominance. Their interests aligned with the Templars in surprising ways. Both required safe passage. Both required reliable communication. Both needed the freedom to move goods and people across borders. As these merchant powers grew, so did the need for land routes that could complement or replace sea lanes threatened by storms or piracy. The Templars, with their growing presence across Europe and the Levant, were ideally placed to manage such routes. They became the silent custodians of movement, not only for soldiers and pilgrims, but for merchants, diplomats, and envoys navigating the unstable political climate. Meanwhile, the Church's influence expanded rapidly. Popes sought to strengthen their political authority by encouraging pilgrimage and crusading. But they quickly realized that neither would be sustainable without a reliable logistical backbone. The Templars, with their discipline, faith, and commitment to order, became indispensable partners in this vast project of spiritual and territorial expansion. Yet this alliance came with expectations. The Church wanted stability. Kings wanted control. Merchants wanted profit. Pilgrims wanted safety, and the Templars, caught in the middle, needed to create a system sophisticated enough to satisfy all these forces without becoming the pawn of any single one. This tension forged the Templars into something unique: a military order that understood diplomacy, economics, geography, and intelligence gathering as deeply as it understood warfare. They built not only fortresses but supply lines, not only chapels but staging posts, not only outposts but coded communication routes stretching from England to Jerusalem. The geopolitical world around them demanded innovation, and the Templars delivered. They learned to operate in lands controlled by Muslims, Byzantines, Armenians, and rival Crusader factions. Each new challenge forced them to refine their understanding of movement and secrecy. They learned when to fight, when to retreat, and when to vanish. Above all, they learned to build networks that transcended borders, networks that would one day outlive the very kingdoms they served. Out of this unstable world emerged the need for hidden routes, secret passes, protected corridors, and silent communication lines. The world behind the Crusades did not just compel the Templars to fight. It compelled them to master the landscape in ways no one else had ever imagined. And in mastering it, they created something far more enduring than victories on a battlefield. They created the skeleton of an invisible Europe. The Camino de Santiago, the famous pilgrimage route stretching across the north of Spain, is often celebrated in history books as a path of faith and devotion. But beneath its surface, there lies a shadow version, a route known only to those who moved through Europe under the cloak of secrecy, a path that deviated from the well-trodden roads, invisible to tax collectors, inquisitive nobles, and wandering brigands. The Templars were among the few who understood its potential, not merely as a spiritual journey, but as a network for movement, supply, and communication that could function beyond the reach of kings or popes. Where pilgrims walked in daylight, guided by church-sanctioned markers, the Templars moved in quiet precision, often under moonlight, following a set of invisible signposts etched into the landscape for those who knew what to look for. These hidden pilgrim routes were not the sprawling roads depicted on official maps. They were narrow, winding paths threaded through forests, across hills, and along riverbanks, carefully chosen for concealment as much as efficiency. Some passed through abandoned farmsteads, where a single loyal farmer might offer shelter or a meal, while others traversed sacred groves whose significance had long been forgotten by the surrounding villages. Each turn and crossing was deliberate, designed to avoid detection while maintaining an unbroken chain of safe passage for travelers and goods alike. For the Templars, these routes were arteries in a living system, pulsing with resources, information, and strategic movement. Markers along the way were subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. A carved notch on a tree might indicate a direction. An arrangement of stones could signal a nearby resting place or a hidden supply cache. Even the orientation of a simple cross or chapel could serve as a coordinate for the brothers. Outsiders might see these symbols as devotional expressions or local tradition, but in truth, they were functional. Each mark was part of a codified language, a map within the landscape, guiding the Templars across hundreds of kilometers of unfamiliar territory without leaving obvious traces. The routes themselves adapted to the needs of those who traveled them. In spring and summer, they took advantage of high river crossings and open plains, where visibility was good and supplies were plentiful. In autumn and winter, the paths shifted to forested corridors or higher elevations, where cold and fog offered protection from both human and natural threats. The knowledge of these seasonal adjustments was not written down. It was passed orally from master to apprentice, carried in memory, and reinforced through countless exercises and patrols. To walk the path incorrectly was to invite disaster. Yet the Templars moved with an instinctive precision, almost as if the land itself whispered directions to them. These shadow paths did more than provide safe passage. They served as lifelines for the Order's broader operations. They connected commanderies, monasteries, and safe houses scattered across France, northern Spain, and the Pyrenees. Supply wagons, often disguised as humble pilgrim convoys, could move without hindrance, delivering food, arms, gold, and information. Messages critical to the Order's survival traveled these paths faster than official couriers, sometimes covering distances in days that would take ordinary travelers weeks. The routes also allowed for the rapid assembly of forces when conflict erupted, ensuring that Templar Knights could appear where they were most needed without drawing attention. Yet these paths were more than practical, they were strategic, almost alive with intention. By analyzing the geography, the Templars could anticipate threats, plan ambushes if necessary, or avoid confrontations entirely. Villages along the way were not just waypoints. They were nodes in a complex network of observation and intelligence, places where loyal eyes could watch the surrounding terrain and signal alerts across vast distances. In essence, the hidden pilgrim routes functioned as both shield and sword, protecting allies while allowing the order to exert influence quietly and efficiently. Some of these secret paths still exist today, though they are disguised by centuries of change. A worn trail through the hills, a disused stone bridge, or a hidden cellar beneath an old chapel may mark what was once a vital artery for the Templars. Archaeologists and historians occasionally stumble upon these remnants, noticing anomalies in the layout of roads or settlements, or discovering subtle markers that point to a broader system. The genius of the Templars lay not only in their creation but in the survival of these routes long after their order had been disbanded, long after their presence had been officially erased from records. It was through these hidden pilgrim routes that the Templars demonstrated a unique combination of practicality, foresight, and discretion. They understood that control of movement was as powerful as control of armies or fortresses. Every twist of a path, every hidden sign, and every covert shelter reflected an intimate knowledge of the land and a meticulous attention to detail. For centuries, these routes allowed them to operate under the radar, maintain cohesion, and project influence across Europe in ways that most contemporary powers could not even imagine. And yet, for all their careful planning, these paths also contained secrets the Templars could never fully control. Some trails led to forgotten chapels whose sanctity predated the order itself. Some passed through areas where bandits or local lords could still intercept the unwary. The genius of the Templars was that they prepared for this unpredictability, creating parallel routes and emergency paths, building redundancy into their network long before the concept existed in modern logistics. In doing so, they transformed a simple pilgrimage trail into a system of shadowed corridors, invisible yet reliable, ephemeral yet enduring. These hidden pilgrim routes were, in essence, the first visible signs of a much larger system, the backbone of a network that would eventually extend across the continent. They exemplified the Templars' mastery of secrecy, their understanding of terrain, and their ability to move men and materials efficiently while leaving no trace. The paths served as both conduit and veil, linking distant commanderies, sustaining the order's operations, and protecting treasures and knowledge that would later vanish into legend. And so, while the outside world remembered only the pilgrim roads of saints and kings, the Templars navigated another Europe entirely, one defined not by borders or armies, but by hidden paths, coded markers, and the quiet certainty that they alone knew where to go and how to get there without being followed. The forests of medieval Europe were more than mere collections of trees. They were vast, living labyrinths that stretched across mountains, plains, and river valleys, their dense canopies hiding secrets from the casual traveler. For the Templars, these forests were both shield and highway, a natural cover for movements that no official road could provide. Unlike ordinary knights or soldiers, who relied on open roads and predictable paths, the Templars developed an almost instinctual understanding of woodland navigation. They memorized glens and ridges, traced hidden clearings where horses could rest, and identified streams and springs that never appeared on any map. To outsiders, the forests seemed impenetrable, but to the order, they were familiar terrain, a network of living corridors guiding them silently across regions where kings' armies dared not venture. In northern and central Europe, where dense woodlands covered much of France, the Rhine Valley, and the Black Forest, the Templars' forest routes were meticulously maintained yet invisible to outsiders. Fallen branches were cleared from critical paths, small stones arranged to mark direction without alerting the uninitiated. Certain trees were carved with subtle symbols, resembling natural knots or bark imperfections, guiding travelers through otherwise indistinguishable trails. These markers, though simple in appearance, functioned as a sophisticated language that only a trained brother could read. One wrong turn could lead to hours of delay or worse, an ambush by bandits or hostile lords. Each route required precision, discipline, and constant observation. Beyond navigation, these forested routes provided strategic advantages that ordinary roads could never offer. The Templars understood the concept of concealment not as theory but as practice. Horses were trained to move quietly, wagons were adapted to minimize noise, and patrols were staggered so that any enemy observing from a distance would see no discernible pattern. Sometimes, the brothers even planted temporary markers, stacked stones, broken branches, or moss patterns, to mislead pursuers or create false trails. turning the forest into both a path and a trap. The result was a network that was both invisible and dynamic, constantly adapting to the movements of others, while preserving the Templars' freedom to act. These forest routes were not purely defensive. They facilitated remarkable speed and coordination. Messages could travel faster than anyone expected. Couriers could deliver news or instructions across dozens of kilometers in a single night, taking advantage of shortcuts, concealed trails, and knowledge of the terrain. Supply wagons carrying food, arms, or treasures moved with the same efficiency, sometimes bypassing entire towns or checkpoints where taxes or inspections awaited. The forests, once considered obstacles by most travelers, became the Order's secret highways, linking castles, commanderies, and monasteries with a reliability no standard road could match. What set these forest paths apart was not merely their secrecy but their integration into a broader network. Each route connected to others, forming a mesh of paths that allowed the Templars to move in multiple directions at once. This redundancy meant that even if one trail was compromised by weather, enemy activity, or a misinformed guide, the brothers could continue along alternate routes without losing time or exposing their operations. The network was resilient, flexible, and adaptive, an early form of strategic planning and risk management that would not be formally recognized for centuries. Archaeological evidence today hints at these routes, though much remains buried beneath layers of time. Sunken paths, unnaturally straight clearings, and isolated stone markers have been discovered in French and German forests, often overlooked as old logging trails or local curiosities. When examined in context, however, patterns emerge. These marks form continuous corridors linking historical Templar sites, consistent with the movement strategies described in contemporary chronicles. Some of these trails intersect with rivers, hills, or abandoned fortresses in ways that suggest deliberate planning, designed for both speed and concealment. In addition to physical logistics, the forests offered a psychological advantage. Knowing that they could vanish among the trees gave Templars a confidence that ordinary soldiers could not muster. They moved with a quiet certainty, aware that even the most disciplined pursuers would struggle to follow them. This sense of control over the environment extended to interactions with locals. Villagers who encountered Templars on forest routes often noted their calm demeanor, their unhurried pace, and their seeming invisibility when leaving trails behind. It was as if the land itself aided their passage, bending to the will of those who understood its rhythms and secrets. These woodland networks were also sites of intelligence gathering. Scouts and patrols observed the movement of other armies, merchants, or envoys, reporting back to commanderies hidden deep within the forests. Beneath the rolling hills and fertile valleys of medieval Europe lay a hidden world of tunnels, shafts, and caverns, remnants of ancient civilizations that had long since vanished. To most, these mines were abandoned relics, dangerous holes in the ground that might collapse at any moment. But to the Templars, they were more than that. They were opportunities. Old Roman mines, disused silver shafts, and forgotten quarry tunnels became secret arteries, hidden chambers, and supply depots, extending the reach of their network far beyond the surface roads. The Order, already skilled in reading the land above, now turned its attention beneath, transforming subterranean spaces into lifelines for survival, concealment, and strategic advantage. The process of repurposing these underground spaces was meticulous. The Templars selected tunnels based on their stability, accessibility, and proximity to existing routes. Some mines had been abandoned for centuries, leaving behind shafts that delved deep into rock, while others were cleverly hidden within forests or hillsides. In many cases, they reinforced walls with timber and stone, creating chambers that could hold men, horses, supplies, and even precious cargo. Water sources within the mines were mapped and channeled to provide drinking water, while natural ventilation was enhanced through small shafts or cleverly concealed openings. These subterranean spaces became living fortresses, capable of sustaining life for days, or even weeks if necessary. One of the key advantages of these mines was their invisibility. While an enemy could monitor surface roads or castles, the underground routes offered movement undetectable to prying eyes. Couriers carrying messages, merchants transporting goods, and knights relocating troops could all move beneath the very feet of those seeking to capture or intercept them. In many regions, these tunnels connected to multiple entry points, allowing for escape in several directions. A single tunnel might lead from a farmhouse on the surface to a forest clearing, or from a commandery to the base of a hill several kilometers away. To those unfamiliar with the system, it appeared as though travelers had vanished into thin air. The Templars also used these mines for storage, protecting treasures and critical documents that the world was not yet ready to see. Some rooms contained chests of gold or silver, iron-bound and locked with multiple keys held by different brothers. Others held coded ledgers and maps, records of routes, resources, and contacts across Europe and the Holy Land. Certain tunnels were even dedicated to sacred relics, safeguarded with layers of secrecy, sometimes buried beneath stone floors or concealed behind false walls. These underground chambers were carefully catalogued, with entrances marked only by those trained to recognize them, ensuring that the knowledge they contained could be retrieved safely when necessary. Beyond logistics, the mines offered strategic military advantages. Commanderies could be reinforced from below, allowing forces to emerge unexpectedly or move unseen behind enemy lines. In times of siege, supplies could be transferred underground, and small groups could conduct reconnaissance without exposing themselves. The combination of surface and subterranean routes created a layered network, where movement above and below ground complemented each other, confounding those who sought to track or intercept the Templars. In essence, the mines were extensions of the order itself, physical manifestations of their ability to operate beyond the constraints of ordinary medieval warfare. The integration of underground tunnels also required careful coordination and discipline. Only the most trusted brothers were allowed to navigate the deeper passages, and novices were trained extensively before venturing beyond surface paths. Lighting was minimal to maintain secrecy, often consisting of slow-burning torches or lamps concealed within stone recesses. Travel was dangerous, with risks of collapse, disorientation, or injury, but the Templars moved with remarkable skill, memorizing the twists and turns of each network as if the tunnels were etched into their very minds. Maps existed, but the true system was carried largely in memory, passed from one generation of knights to the next in an unbroken chain of knowledge. Some of these subterranean routes also connected to chapels or commanderies, creating spaces that were simultaneously spiritual and strategic. Hidden staircases or shafts could lead from a chapel's crypt to an underground corridor, allowing brothers to move unseen, protect sacred relics, or escape sudden danger. Architecture itself became a tool of secrecy. Walls, floors, and ceilings were engineered to conceal entrances, redirect sound, and guide travelers safely through the labyrinth. These designs were more than practical, they were intelligent, reflecting the Templars' understanding of both human behavior and the natural environment. In addition, the mines offered a psychological advantage. Knowing that they could vanish beneath the ground, the Templars moved with a confidence that unsettled both allies and enemies. Their presence could appear and disappear at will, giving the impression of omnipresence. Stories circulated of knights who seemed to vanish into solid rock only to reappear at distant locations with supplies or reinforcements, feeding rumors of the Order's near-supernatural capabilities. This perception, whether intentional or not, enhanced the Templars' reputation for efficiency, precision, and almost uncanny foresight. Modern archaeology has revealed traces of these underground networks, though much remains unexplored. Sunken entrances, reinforced chambers, and tunnels that connect distant Templar sites hint at the sophistication of the system. In many cases, these routes were later repurposed or sealed, leaving fragments for historians to piece together. Yet even the partial evidence demonstrates a remarkable level of planning, engineering, and strategic foresight, underscoring the Templars' mastery not only of surface roads but of the hidden world beneath Europe's forests and hills. The use of subterranean routes also reflects the Templars' broader philosophy: control, secrecy, and adaptability. Surface roads were vulnerable to patrols, taxes, and ambushes. Underground networks, by contrast, offered autonomy and resilience. By combining both approaches, the Order created a dynamic system capable of responding to threats, protecting resources, and sustaining operations even in the most dangerous circumstances. It was a network built for survival, efficiency, and secrecy, a model of strategic thinking centuries ahead of its time. Ultimately, the minds of Europe became more than mere passages. They were extensions of the Templars' vision, physical manifestations of their understanding of movement, logistics, and secrecy. Above ground, they moved with discipline and precision. Below ground, they operated in silence and concealment. The combination of these approaches allowed the order to maintain operations across Europe and the Holy Land long after other powers would have collapsed under political pressure, military attack, or logistical failure. In the hands of the Templars, abandoned mines were transformed into arteries of survival and dominance, hidden worlds that connected landscapes, fortified their operations, and ensured that even when kings and armies sought to erase them, their presence endured in the shadowed veins of the continent. Rivers in medieval Europe were more than natural features. They were lifelines, highways, and sometimes deadly obstacles all at once. For ordinary travelers, rivers posed challenges. Unpredictable currents, weak bridges, and marauding ferrymen who might demand tolls at every crossing. For the Templars, however, rivers were instruments of strategy, essential components in their invisible network that spanned the continent. The order studied each waterway with meticulous attention, understanding how to use it for movement, supply, and communication while avoiding the dangers that trapped lesser travelers. Every bend, every ford, and every hidden inlet became a node in a carefully crafted system designed for speed, secrecy, and survival. The Templars relied on rivers for multiple purposes. Shallow crossings provided secret routes for couriers and small patrols, allowing them to move quickly without detection. Deeper waters were harnessed for transporting larger supplies, including weapons, food, and precious cargo, often using flat-bottomed boats or barges that could navigate silently under the cover of night. Riverbanks became staging areas where goods could be transferred to carts or horses, with paths carefully designed to avoid observation from villages or castles. The movement along rivers was not random. It was choreographed, precise, and rehearsed, reflecting the same discipline applied to their roads and forest paths. In addition to transportation, rivers served as natural defensive barriers. By controlling key crossings, the Templars could predict enemy movement, funnel invaders into predictable paths, and safeguard their own operations. Some bridges were reinforced and guarded, while others were kept secret or dismantled when not in use, creating layers of unpredictability for anyone attempting pursuit. Ferrymen, who might appear as simple civilians, were often informants or allies, quietly assisting the order in monitoring traffic along the water. In essence, rivers were both highways and fortresses, dual-purpose tools in the Templars' strategic arsenal. Waterways also allowed the Templars to connect distant regions efficiently. Rivers such as the Loire, the Rhône, and the Rhine were integrated into their broader network, linking commanderies, monasteries, and fortified outposts. A message or cargo could travel hundreds of kilometers with relative ease, often arriving faster than surface roads could allow. These connections were critical, especially in times of crisis, when speed and discretion were essential. Unlike ordinary roads, rivers offered a natural cover. Fog, shifting currents, and hidden inlets allowed the order to move undetected, while making tracking by enemies exceedingly difficult. The Templars also understood the seasonal rhythms of rivers. Spring floods could render passages impassable, while low summer waters exposed hidden sandbanks and shallow fords ideal for crossings. Winter brought ice in some regions, providing frozen avenues across rivers that would normally be impassable but also carrying the risk of collapse. The Order's intimate knowledge of these cycles allowed them to plan movements with extraordinary precision. Couriers, messengers, and supply trains timed their journeys to take advantage of natural conditions, minimizing risk while maximizing efficiency. This attention to the environment extended their reach and reinforced the sense that the Templars were guided by an almost supernatural awareness of the land. Bridges, both natural and constructed, were another critical element in the river network. Some were heavily fortified, serving as both checkpoints and defensive positions. Others were deliberately understated or hidden, accessible only to those who knew the signs. In some regions, the order maintained small floating platforms or makeshift ferries, enabling them to bypass monitored crossings entirely. Each bridge, each crossing, and each landing point was selected and maintained with foresight, ensuring that the Templars could move where others could not, and often appear unexpectedly to allies or in the midst of conflict. Rivers also played a role in intelligence gathering. Lookouts along banks monitored movements of merchants, armies, and envoys. Signaling systems, including lanterns, flags, or even discreetly arranged stones and branches, allowed information to travel faster than messengers on roads. These river nodes were part of an integrated communication network that stretched across Europe, linking commanderies and enabling coordination over vast distances. In many cases, the order could predict enemy movements or respond to threats before they materialized, relying on the waterways as both sensors and conduits. The psychological impact of river mastery should not be underestimated. To those who knew only surface routes, the Templars seemed omnipresent. They could appear at key locations with supplies or reinforcements in hours, not days. Couriers moved across rivers in ways that seemed impossible to outsiders. Villagers and rival soldiers alike whispered about knights who vanished into misty banks only to reappear elsewhere, reinforcing the aura of mystery surrounding the order. Rivers, once natural obstacles, had become tools of illusion and strategy. Moreover, the integration of river routes with forest paths, hidden roads, and subterranean tunnels created a multidimensional network. The Templars could move seamlessly from land to water, surface to underground, always choosing the path that maximized efficiency and security. A single journey might begin on a hidden road, continue along a river, and end in an underground chamber, all orchestrated with precision. This level of coordination reflected the Order's advanced understanding of logistics, intelligence, and the terrain itself. Over time, these river networks also became conduits for trade, diplomacy, and influence. They allowed the Templars to maintain connections with allied orders, merchant cities, and even distant monarchs. Couriers could carry messages of negotiation, intelligence, or secret directives, while supply routes ensured that allies received what they needed without delay. In effect, the rivers were the circulatory system of a hidden European network, sustaining movement, communication, and power in ways that few contemporaries could comprehend. Even today, remnants of these river routes can be traced through historical records, archaeological findings, and the layout of medieval towns. Bridges, riverbanks, and isolated docks often reveal subtle patterns indicating use beyond ordinary commerce or travel. These traces testify to the Templars' mastery of natural waterways, their integration of rivers into a complex strategic system, and their understanding of Europe as a network of corridors, both visible and invisible, that allowed them to move, influence, and survive when others could not. In the end, rivers were more than geographic features for the Templars. They were highways, fortresses, intelligence networks, and instruments of psychological dominance. By mastering them, the Order transcended the limitations of the medieval landscape, moving with speed, precision, and secrecy across Europe. The waterways, like the forests and hidden roads, became threads in the vast tapestry of a network that few could see, but everyone would feel the effects of, whether in whispered tales, unexpected reinforcements, or the invisible reach of a shadowy order that understood the land better than anyone else. Mountains have always been more than barriers. They are sentinels of the land, guardians of secrets, and, for the Templars, indispensable tools of movement and strategy. Unlike ordinary travelers who saw jagged peaks and treacherous passes as obstacles, the Order viewed them as highways of concealment and opportunity. From the Pyrenees separating France and Spain to the rugged Alps dividing northern Italy and the Holy Roman Empire, these highlands became integral components of the Templars' network, offering routes invisible to kings, mercenaries, or tax collectors. Every ridge, valley, and cliffside was studied with obsessive care, transformed from natural impediment into a labyrinth of strategic advantage. The Templars' understanding of mountains went far beyond mere geography. They memorized the locations of natural shelters, caves, overhangs, and concealed plateaus that could protect men, horses, and supplies from storms or ambushes. Seasonal patterns were cataloged meticulously. Spring avalanches, Summer storms, winter snows, and autumn mists were all anticipated, each influencing the timing of movements along mountain paths. What seemed impassable to ordinary soldiers was, to the Templars, a predictable, navigable system. Knowledge of wind direction, sun angle, and rock formations allowed them to move silently and unseen, turning the very terrain into an ally. Mountain passes were more than mere routes, they were instruments of tactical planning. Narrow corridors could funnel potential threats into controlled zones, allowing the Templars to monitor or intercept enemies while remaining undetected themselves. Some passes contained hidden steps, loose stones, or natural cover that provided vantage points for observation or ambush. In certain regions, they even constructed minimal fortifications or concealed platforms to secure particularly strategic points without drawing attention. These highland routes gave the order mobility that conventional forces could not match, enabling rapid response across vast and often hostile territories. Horses, mules, and even pack animals were trained to handle the precarious conditions of mountain travel. Riders learned to balance on narrow ledges, descend steep scree slopes, and cross hidden streams without leaving tracks that could betray their movement. This expertise was essential not only for transporting supplies but also for moving knights quickly to reinforce distant commanderies. The combination of animal training, environmental knowledge, and disciplined coordination made Templar patrols through mountains almost ghost-like. Present yet unseen, swift yet silent. The mountains also served as storage and staging areas. Remote caves and highland plateaus often held hidden supplies of food, weapons, or gold, shielded from thieves and armies alike. Some sites doubled as waypoints connecting forest paths, river crossings, and surface roads, allowing the Templars to maintain continuity in their network even in regions where surface routes were impassable or heavily monitored. These high-altitude stores were particularly valuable during harsh winters, when conventional supply lines were blocked by snow or ice, ensuring that the order could continue operations when others faltered. Intelligence gathering was another critical function of mountain routes. Lookouts positioned along ridges could observe enemy movements across valleys, report unusual activity in nearby villages, or detect approaching caravans. Signals were transmitted using a system of fires, mirrors, or discrete markers, often perfectly visible only to those trained to interpret them. These highland observation posts effectively extended the Templars' reach, allowing them to monitor vast regions without needing to deploy large armies. Mountains thus became both shield and sensor, protecting the order while feeding vital information into the broader network. The psychological advantage of mastering mountains was profound. Rivals and enemies often perceived the Templars as omnipresent, able to appear in the most unlikely places with uncanny precision. Stories circulated of knights who emerged from peaks thought impassable, of messages arriving faster than any standard courier could have traveled. Mountains, once intimidating, were transformed into instruments of both mobility and myth, reinforcing the aura of the order as disciplined, resourceful, and seemingly everywhere at once. Integration with other elements of the network amplified the mountain's utility. Hidden trails from forests descended into valleys that led to rivers, which in turn connected to secret roads and commanderies. Subterranean tunnels sometimes emerged in remote highlands, creating multiple layers of movement and concealment. This multidimensional system allowed the Templars to adapt to any situation, avoid hostile forces, respond to emergencies, or move treasure and messages with unparalleled efficiency. No single element, forest, river, road, or mountain, functioned in isolation. Together, they formed a resilient, continent-spanning web. Even today, traces of these routes can be found in subtle ways. Weathered steps carved into stone, cairns marking hidden paths, or old trail networks documented in medieval texts that reference paths known to few. Archaeologists and historians often uncover these fragments piecemeal, revealing how the Templars exploited terrain that others deemed impassable. The sophistication of these networks speaks to a level of planning and environmental mastery centuries ahead of conventional European military thinking. Mountains were not merely obstacles to overcome, they were partners in strategy. They provided concealment, intelligence, transport, and psychological advantage. By mastering the peaks and passes, The Templars ensured their network could function across diverse terrains, maintaining communication, mobility, and secrecy even in the most challenging landscapes. In every ridge and hidden valley, the Order left subtle marks of their presence, paths, signals, and caches that connected the vast and fragmented lands of Europe into a coherent, invisible system of power. Through their skillful navigation of mountains, the Templars demonstrated a philosophy that defined their order. Control of the environment was as crucial as control of men. Secrecy was as important as force, and knowledge of terrain, weather, and human behavior was the most potent weapon of all. In the highlands of Europe, the Order carved an invisible skeleton of movement and influence, one that would endure long after the political and military structures around them crumbled. The mountains became their guardians and allies, silent witnesses to a network so precise, so disciplined, that it still astonishes historians today. Castles and fortresses were the most visible symbols of power in medieval Europe, stone sentinels rising from hillsides, commanding valleys, and overlooking strategic routes. To kings, dukes, and nobles, these structures represented control, dominion, and security. To the Templars, however, castles were something more nuanced, both shields and anchors for a hidden, continent-spanning network. While most lords focused on building fortifications to dominate territory, the Order used these strongholds as nodes in a dynamic system, combining defense, logistics, and intelligence in ways that conventional military thinking could not grasp. Each castle was more than walls and towers. It was a hub linking secret roads, river routes, forest paths, and mountain corridors into a cohesive web of movement and power. When the Templars first began constructing fortifications in Europe and the Holy Land, their priorities differed from those of typical rulers. Defensive walls were, of course, important, but accessibility, concealment, and connectivity mattered as much, sometimes more. A fortress might be deliberately placed near a hidden pass, overlooking a secret river crossing, or adjacent to an underground tunnel system. From these vantage points, the brothers could monitor trade routes, anticipate enemy movements, and ensure the safe passage of caravans, pilgrims, and supplies. In essence, castles were transformed from static structures into strategic command centers, designed not only to withstand sieges, but to facilitate the flow of people and goods across vast distances. Inside these fortresses, the Templars implemented meticulous planning. Storage rooms were organized to accommodate supplies for extended periods. Hidden chambers concealed valuables, documents, and sacred relics, and internal passages allowed knights to move unseen from tower to tower. Some fortresses incorporated complex water management systems, ensuring that wells, cisterns, and hidden streams could sustain inhabitants even if external sources were cut off. Entrances were controlled, but often multiple secret exits existed, linking the interior to the surrounding landscape. These designs reflected a philosophy that valued flexibility, redundancy, and discretion over mere display of strength. The location of castles also played a critical role in the Templars' broader network. Strategic positioning allowed them to control not just territory but movement itself. By placing fortresses at key junctions, river crossings, mountain passes, or hidden forest trails, they could influence who moved where and when. A fortress was simultaneously a waypoint for allies and a barrier to enemies, controlling access in a way that ordinary armies could not achieve. In many cases, castles served as relay points for messages and intelligence, ensuring rapid communication across regions while remaining largely invisible to outsiders. Furthermore, Templar castles were designed with the psychological dimension of power in mind. To local populations, these fortresses conveyed security and stability, encouraging cooperation and loyalty. To rivals, the presence of a Templar stronghold suggested a presence far more extensive than a single building could indicate. Legends of impregnable fortresses, sudden reinforcements, or knights appearing where least expected reinforced the perception of the Order as omnipresent and unstoppable. The castles, while tangible, became instruments in a network whose true reach remained largely invisible. Integration with other elements of the Templars' network magnified the effectiveness of these fortresses. Forest paths led to hidden gates, rivers provided supply lines, underground tunnels offered escape routes or secret access points. A fortress was rarely isolated. It existed as a node, connecting multiple layers of mobility and communication. Couriers could leave a castle undetected, traverse secret routes, and arrive at distant locations before conventional forces could react. These fortresses functioned as both anchors and hubs, securing the network while enabling rapid and covert operations. The architectural innovation within Templar fortresses was remarkable. Many incorporated features that were advanced for their time. Concentric walls, angled bastions, hidden chambers, and cleverly disguised entrances. Some fortresses in the Holy Land were designed to confuse attackers, with maze-like interiors that allowed defenders to emerge unexpectedly or funnel enemies into controlled zones. Even in Europe, the adaptation of these designs reflected a deep understanding of both military tactics and human psychology. Fortresses were not simply defensive, they were instruments of control, intelligence, and strategic flexibility. Castles also served as training centers and staging grounds for complex operations. Knights and sergeants practiced maneuvers in courtyards and towers, honed their understanding of terrain, and learned to navigate secret corridors and hidden passages. Supplies, horses, and weapons were rotated through the network efficiently, ensuring that the order could respond quickly to crises. These fortresses enabled a level of operational sophistication unmatched by contemporary powers, transforming each site into a living component of a larger, interconnected system. Even today, the remnants of Templar castles hint at this hidden complexity. From thick walls and imposing gates to concealed chambers and secret staircases, traces of their multi-layered design survive, challenging historians to consider how these structures functioned beyond mere defense. Archaeological studies often reveal tunnels linking fortresses to distant terrain, hidden wells and cisterns, and layouts optimized for both secrecy and efficiency. Each discovery reinforces the notion that Templar fortresses were far more than fortifications. They were hubs of strategy, movement, and hidden influence. Ultimately, Templar castles exemplified the Order's philosophy. Power was most effective when combined with secrecy, intelligence, and mobility. They controlled terrain, monitored movement, and coordinated operations across regions, all while appearing as conventional strongholds to outsiders. In the context of Europe's fragmented and perilous landscape, these fortresses were critical nodes in a network that allowed the Order to operate with precision, efficiency, and invisibility. Through castles, the Templars translated architectural mastery into logistical, strategic, and psychological dominance, creating a system that bound forests, rivers, roads, mountains, and tunnels into a cohesive, continent-spanning web. The castles stood as monuments to more than military skill. They were living symbols of the Order's understanding of movement, secrecy, and control, silently orchestrating a network that allowed the Templars to appear everywhere, yet leave almost no trace. Trade routes in medieval Europe were arteries of wealth, influence, and opportunity, and the Templars understood their potential better than almost any other institution of the time. Long before modern logistics, the Order recognized that controlling movement of goods meant controlling influence, and that every coin, cargo, and contract carried the power to shape regions and relationships. These trade routes, often sprawling from the bustling ports of Venice and Genoa to inland markets in France, Germany, and the Low Countries, became not just commercial corridors but integral parts of a hidden network the Templars meticulously navigated and, in many cases, subtly controlled. Unlike ordinary merchants, who relied on well-trodden paths and public fairs, the Templars developed alternative channels, shadow networks that allowed them to move goods, treasure, and information discreetly. By combining hidden roads, forest paths, river crossings, and subterranean tunnels, they created routes that avoided taxes, tolls, and the scrutiny of local authorities. Caravans disguised as pilgrim groups, traders, or even religious processions could transport commodities without interference. This dual function of the trade routes, public and covert, allowed the Order to operate legally in plain sight while simultaneously maintaining the secrecy and efficiency necessary for military, financial, and strategic objectives. The commodities that flowed along these routes were varied and often vital. Precious metals, textiles, spices, wine, grain, and weapons all traveled through Templar-managed networks, connecting commanderies, fortresses, and allied territories across Europe. In some regions, These routes enabled the order to supply crusader strongholds in the Holy Land, ferrying arms, food, and reinforcements with a reliability unmatched by ordinary medieval transport. The flow of goods also supported local economies, strengthening alliances with merchants, lords, and towns who depended on the timely arrival of products. By controlling both overt and covert channels, the Templars wielded an influence that was subtle but profound, shaping economies without ever appearing to dominate them. Control of trade routes required intelligence, foresight, and coordination. The Templars monitored market towns, river ports, and mountain passes to anticipate disruptions, whether from bandits, rival orders, or seasonal obstacles. They timed caravans to take advantage of seasonal changes, moving grain before floods or wine before winter snows blocked passes. Couriers often traveled ahead of shipments to ensure paths were clear, signaling danger or delays using discrete markers understood only by trained brothers. This level of planning ensured that even in times of conflict, supply lines remained uninterrupted, reinforcing the perception of the order's efficiency and near-supernatural reach. Trade routes also provided a cover for intelligence gathering. As caravans passed through towns, Templar agents could observe military movements, political developments, or local disputes, sending reports back through their hidden network. Merchants themselves often unwittingly contributed to this system, carrying coded messages, discrete tokens, or information between regions. The order's ability to blend commerce with espionage gave them a strategic advantage over kingdoms, rival orders, and local lords who relied solely on conventional armies or messengers. Moreover, the Templars' integration with merchant republics amplified the reach of their networks. Cities such as Venice, Genoa, and Marseille had vested interests in secure, efficient trade routes. By aligning with these economic powers, the Templars ensured safe passage for caravans, ships, and treasure, while subtly influencing regional politics and economics. They became trusted intermediaries between secular and commercial interests, bridging gaps that few others could navigate. This dual role as protectors and controllers of trade enhanced their influence and allowed the order to extend its network without provoking overt hostility from kings or merchants. Some routes were deliberately designed to intersect with other elements of the Templar system. Forest paths could lead to secret river crossings, which then connected to fortified towns or castles. Underground tunnels allowed cargo to bypass heavily monitored checkpoints, while mountain passes offered shortcuts invisible to ordinary travelers. This interconnectedness ensured resilience. If one route was blocked, another could carry the same goods or messages, maintaining continuity across vast distances. The system was dynamic, responsive, and remarkably advanced, reflecting a level of strategic planning that few contemporaries could match. The psychological impact of controlling trade routes was significant. To local lords, the Templars appeared both indispensable and mysterious, capable of moving goods faster than anyone else while avoiding scrutiny. Stories of convoys appearing unexpectedly or treasure arriving ahead of time reinforced the aura of omnipresence. Merchants trusted the order not only because of security but because their efficiency seemed unparalleled. In effect, the trade routes were instruments of perception as well as logistics, enhancing the order's reputation across Europe and the Holy Land. Even today, remnants of these medieval trade networks can be traced through old roads, ports, and marketplaces, but many of the covert channels remain hidden, obscured by centuries of change. Archaeological evidence, historical accounts, and analysis of medieval commerce suggest that the Templars operated a level of coordination and discretion unmatched by secular powers. By mastering the flow of goods and information, they became invisible yet essential players in the economic and political life of Europe. In essence, the Templars transformed trade routes into living, multifunctional networks. They were not merely pathways for commerce but veins of influence, secrecy, and power, connecting forests, rivers, mountains, roads, and fortresses into a cohesive system. Through these routes, the order ensured survival, projected authority, and maintained mobility in a continent often fragmented by war, politics, and natural obstacles. Trade was more than profit. It was a strategic tool, a medium of intelligence, and a vital component in the invisible infrastructure that allowed the Templars to operate with unmatched efficiency and subtlety. By controlling these arteries of medieval Europe, the Templars demonstrated an understanding of logistics, strategy, and influence that would echo long after their downfall, leaving traces in the landscape, records, and legends that continue to fascinate historians and explorers to this day. The Templars' understanding of communication in medieval Europe went far beyond the simple exchange of letters or verbal messages. In an age without telegraphs, telephones, or standardized postal systems, the order developed an intricate web of information flow that rivaled any modern intelligence network. Every movement, shipment, or military operation depended on the ability to send and receive messages swiftly, securely, and reliably. Traditional couriers, constrained by roads, weather, and the risk of banditry, were insufficient. The Templars adapted, integrating forest paths, river networks, mountain passes, and even underground tunnels to create a system that allowed them to communicate across hundreds of kilometers with astonishing efficiency. Communication was not merely about speed. It was about secrecy and accuracy. Messages were encoded in ways that appeared innocuous to outsiders. Letters could be disguised as mundane correspondence between merchants. Missives might be hidden inside religious texts, or instructions embedded in seemingly ordinary ledgers. Physical tokens were also used. Small carved objects, rings, or marks on cloth could indicate a location, a status, or an urgent message. Each member of the order understood these codes, and training in their interpretation was rigorous. The slightest error could result in miscommunication, loss of supplies, or exposure to hostile forces. Yet through repetition and discipline, the Templars achieved a level of reliability that allowed their operations to function almost invisibly across Europe and the Holy Land. The integration of natural and built terrain into this communication network was critical. Forests offered cover for messengers moving on foot or horseback, while rivers allowed the rapid transport of letters or items in small, discreet boats. Mountain passes provided vantage points for observation and signaling, and underground tunnels enabled messages to bypass checkpoints or enemy lines. Even castles and fortresses were designed with communication in mind. Hidden stairways, bell towers, and visual markers ensured that information could travel swiftly and securely between nodes of the network. In effect, the Templars transformed the landscape into a living, interactive system, where terrain itself aided in the transmission of intelligence. Couriers were selected with care, trained not only in speed and endurance but in stealth and observation. Some were adept riders capable of navigating difficult mountain passes. Others were skilled in reading forest signs or decoding visual markers. Their routes were planned meticulously, often with alternate paths to circumvent potential danger. In times of crisis, multiple messengers might carry the same message via different routes to ensure redundancy, a practice that reduced the risk of interception and guaranteed that critical information reached its destination. These methods reflect a level of operational sophistication that few contemporary powers could achieve, emphasizing foresight, adaptability, and discipline. Visual signaling complemented physical messengers. Towers, hilltops, and natural vantage points were equipped with discrete markers. Fires, lanterns, or flags could convey messages across long distances. The system relied on both speed and interpretation, requiring that each signal be read and transmitted accurately by those trained in the code. Simple markers along hidden trails, arranged stones, notches on trees, or unusual patterns in vegetation could indicate supply drops, warnings of enemy presence, or directions to safe houses. In many cases, these signals were so subtle that only a Templar familiar with the network could recognize them, blending seamlessly into the natural and human landscape. The psychological aspect of communication was as important as the physical. By appearing omnipresent, capable of responding rapidly to events across vast regions, the Templars cultivated an aura of almost supernatural capability. Local rulers, merchants, and even rival orders could not predict the order's movements, fostering both respect and fear. This perception reinforced the effectiveness of their networks. Messages arrived in unexpected places, reinforcements appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and intelligence reached decision-makers before threats could materialize. Communication, therefore, was as much about influence and perception as it was about information transfer. Training and discipline were key to maintaining this network. Every member understood not only the content of messages but the routes, timings, and protocols for their delivery. Mistakes were rare, and redundancy ensured that the loss of a single courier or the compromise of one path did not cripple operations. This level of organization required rigorous oversight, with senior members coordinating the flow of information and adapting to changes in the political or physical landscape. It was a living system, constantly evolving to meet the demands of war, diplomacy, and logistics. The Templars' communication network also extended to international coordination. European commanderies needed to remain in contact with holdings in the Holy Land, requiring coordination across seas, hostile territories, and multiple languages. Messages could be relayed via a combination of river transport, caravan movement, and encoded correspondence, ensuring that strategic decisions were informed by timely and accurate intelligence. This global perspective on communication was unprecedented for the medieval period, demonstrating the Order's understanding of connectivity and influence across multiple domains. Even today, traces of these methods linger in historical records and archaeological evidence. Secret compartments in castles, hidden markers in forests, and coded manuscripts reveal the lengths to which the Templars went to protect and transmit information. Their approach was systematic, comprehensive, and remarkably advanced, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of human behavior, terrain, and risk management. In essence, the Templars created a medieval communications network that combined strategy, logistics, and secrecy, allowing them to act with precision, agility, and almost preternatural foresight across Europe. By mastering communication, the Templars ensured that every element of their network, forests, rivers, mountains, tunnels, and fortresses, functioned as part of an integrated whole. Intelligence, messages, and directives moved seamlessly through these channels, supporting logistics, military operations, and strategic planning. This capability transformed the Order from a collection of fortresses and knights into a coordinated, continent-spanning organization, operating with a level of efficiency and secrecy that remains astonishing even by modern standards. In short, the Templars' communication system was the lifeblood of their hidden network, a sophisticated, multi-layered web that allowed them to be everywhere at once, invisible yet influential, shaping the course of medieval Europe with a precision few could even imagine. The Templars' financial network was as sophisticated and clandestine as their physical routes, forming the backbone of their power across Europe and the Holy Land. In an era where banking systems were rudimentary at best, the Order developed mechanisms that allowed them to move wealth, manage resources, and support crusader campaigns with a reliability unmatched by secular rulers or mercantile guilds. Money was not merely a tool for trade or survival, it was a means of influence, leverage, and strategic coordination. By understanding and controlling the flow of funds, the Templars ensured that their operations could continue unimpeded, even under political pressure or military threat. At the core of this network were the commanderies, fortified sites spread across Europe that acted as both administrative centers and financial hubs. Each commandery maintained ledgers, stored coinage, and managed local contributions from nobles, merchants, and pilgrims. These funds were then redistributed to support knights, fund expeditions, and maintain fortresses. In some cases, commanderies also acted as safe deposits, holding treasure on behalf of patrons who trusted the Order to protect their wealth. The combination of security, reliability, and discretion made the Templars a trusted institution for both secular and religious elites, enhancing their influence far beyond the battlefield. Beyond simple storage, the Templars pioneered early forms of banking and credit. Pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land could deposit money at one commandery and withdraw an equivalent sum at another, eliminating the need to carry large sums across dangerous terrain. Merchants could arrange for funds to be transferred between distant cities using letters of credit, which were secured and verified through the Order's network. These financial instruments were not only innovative, they were revolutionary, allowing the Templars to operate across vast distances with minimal risk while maintaining strict accountability and secrecy. The integration of financial and physical networks amplified the Order's capabilities. Wealth moved along hidden roads, rivers, and forest paths, often protected by knights or concealed within cargo shipments. Underground tunnels and secret chambers within castles provided additional security, ensuring that even during periods of conflict, funds remained safe and accessible. By linking financial assets to strategic routes and fortresses, the Templars created a system in which money was both mobile and secure, capable of supporting operations anywhere within their sphere of influence. Accounting and record-keeping were critical to the success of this network. Ledgers were meticulously maintained, often using coded symbols or discrete shorthand to protect sensitive information. Only trusted brothers were allowed access to these records, and knowledge was compartmentalized to reduce risk of exposure. This level of organization ensured that resources could be allocated efficiently, whether to fund a distant commandery, supply an army, or secure the construction of a new fortress. The financial system functioned as the circulatory system of the order, sustaining both its operations and its influence. Financial intelligence was another component of the network. By monitoring markets, trade flows, and regional economies, the Templars could anticipate shortages, manipulate resource distribution, and even influence political decisions. Wealth was not merely passive. It was a tool of strategy. In some cases, the order lent funds to rulers or merchants in ways that strengthened alliances and secured cooperation. In others, control over local economies allowed them to facilitate supply chains, support crusader campaigns, or maintain a logistical advantage over rivals. The financial network was, therefore, both protective and proactive, shaping events as much as it sustained them. Security measures for financial transfers were equally sophisticated. Money could be moved in small, inconspicuous increments, concealed within mundane shipments or carried by trusted couriers along secret routes. In some regions, underground tunnels and hidden chambers provided temporary storage, allowing assets to be repositioned discreetly. These measures ensured that even if an enemy became aware of the movement of funds, interception was difficult, if not impossible. The combination of secrecy, redundancy, and mobility made the Templars' financial operations remarkably resilient. The psychological impact of this system should not be underestimated. Patrons, allies, and even rivals were aware of the order's ability to manage wealth with unmatched efficiency and discretion. This perception reinforced trust, commanded respect, and often deterred attempts at interference. Stories circulated of treasure moving across continents with seeming invisibility, of funds appearing precisely when needed, and of the order sustaining operations even when kingdoms faltered. Wealth, in the hands of the Templars, became both a practical tool and a symbol of invisible authority. Integration with other elements of the network, trade routes, river crossings, forest paths, mountain passes, castles, and communication lines, ensured that financial operations were seamless. A single commandery could coordinate funding, intelligence, and supplies for multiple operations simultaneously, linking Europe to the Holy Land without exposing its full reach. The multi-layered system provided both redundancy and flexibility, allowing the order to adapt quickly to changing circumstances while maintaining control over critical resources. Even today, the traces of this financial network are visible in charters, ledgers, and remnants of Templar holdings. Analysis of surviving documents reveals a sophisticated understanding of economics, credit, and risk management that predated modern banking by centuries. These insights underscore the order's ability to operate as a highly organized, continent-spanning institution, where money, information, and logistics were integrated into a coherent system that reinforced secrecy, efficiency, and influence. Ultimately, the Templars' financial network was more than a support mechanism. It was a pillar of their power. By mastering the movement, storage, and allocation of wealth, they ensured that every facet of their operations, from military campaigns to logistical coordination, functioned smoothly. The network allowed them to project authority, maintain independence, and sustain influence across Europe and the Holy Land, often invisibly yet with remarkable effectiveness. In combining innovation, secrecy, and strategic foresight, the Templars transformed finance into a tool of survival, power, and control, demonstrating that mastery of money could be as decisive as mastery of swords, castles, or hidden paths in the pursuit of influence and enduring legacy. The Templars' recruitment and training processes were as methodical and secretive as their hidden networks, forming the foundation of an organization capable of operating with unparalleled discipline and cohesion. Becoming a Templar was far more than taking vows. It was an initiation into a world where knowledge, skill, and loyalty were inseparable. Novices were evaluated not only for their piety and courage but for their intellect, adaptability, and ability to navigate both visible and invisible landscapes. The order sought individuals who could think strategically, act decisively, and maintain secrecy under pressure, a rare combination that ensured their network remained secure and efficient across Europe and the Holy Land. Training began with the basics of monastic discipline, reflecting the order's religious origins. Novices learned prayer, ritual, and moral philosophy, cultivating the inner fortitude necessary for both combat and obedience. Yet, alongside spiritual education came rigorous instruction in skills essential for survival and operational effectiveness. Swordsmanship, horsemanship, and martial tactics were taught in conjunction with navigation, survival, and reconnaissance. A Templar needed to move through forests, mountains, and rivers with the same confidence as he moved through a monastery or fortress. Each lesson reinforced the principle that discipline of body and mind was inseparable from loyalty to the order. Stealth and observation were critical components of training. Novices were instructed to read the landscape as both a friend and an adversary. Forests, hills, rivers, and roads were studied not merely for travel but for concealment, intelligence gathering, and tactical advantage. Small exercises might involve moving unseen through a forest to a designated point, identifying hidden markers, or navigating a river crossing without leaving traces. In winter or inclement weather, recruits learned to adapt, understanding that nature itself could be both a guide and an obstacle. This training created knights who were not only physically capable but also extraordinarily attuned to their surroundings, a vital asset for the secrecy and mobility of the order. The order also emphasized the mastery of subterranean and constructed environments. Hidden tunnels, fortified castles, and secret chambers were part of every Templar's education. Novices learned to memorize layouts, recognize concealed entrances, and navigate underground passages by memory alone. They trained in the use of torches, lanterns, and natural ventilation to maintain secrecy and efficiency, while understanding the risks of collapse, disorientation, or enemy interception. This knowledge was passed down meticulously, often orally, ensuring that the network's integrity could survive even the loss of individual members or documents. Strategic thinking and problem-solving were equally important. The Templars were trained to anticipate threats, plan contingencies, and coordinate with others across multiple terrains and logistical challenges. Exercises might simulate intercepted couriers, blocked river crossings, or compromised fortresses, requiring recruits to improvise while adhering to protocol. These lessons taught adaptability within a framework of discipline, a combination that made the order resilient and capable of operating even in hostile or unpredictable environments. In addition to physical and strategic training, recruits were taught the subtle arts of diplomacy and intelligence. Many Templars acted as intermediaries between monarchs, merchants, and religious leaders, requiring skills in negotiation, observation, and discretion. They learned to read people as carefully as they read maps or terrain, understanding alliances, motivations, and vulnerabilities. This human intelligence complemented their logistical networks, ensuring that operations were informed by both terrain and human factors, a dual mastery that amplified the order's reach and influence. The initiation process itself reinforced secrecy, loyalty, and psychological resilience. Novices took solemn vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they also pledged to protect the order's knowledge, networks, and assets with unwavering discretion. This combination of spiritual commitment and operational secrecy created a mindset in which individual actions were always subordinated to the order's mission. Trust, discipline, and cohesion became defining characteristics, ensuring that members could operate effectively in isolation, in teams, or across distant commanderies. Mentorship played a crucial role in sustaining the order's capabilities. Experienced knights guided novices through complex exercises, passed down knowledge of routes, signals, and tactics, and provided both moral and practical instruction. This system of apprenticeship ensured continuity of skill, memory, and tradition, reinforcing the resilience of the Templars' network across generations. Knowledge was not written down recklessly. It was embedded in the minds and practices of trusted members, creating a living archive of strategy, logistics, and operational intelligence. Even in daily routines, training reinforced readiness and adaptability. From the maintenance of arms and armor to the inspection of horses, fortresses, and supplies, every task had operational significance. Novices learned that attention to detail could mean the difference between success and failure, between secrecy preserved and compromise exposed. Over time, these lessons cultivated a mindset in which every action, no matter how mundane, contributed to the functioning of a larger, invisible system. Ultimately, Templar training forged knights who were far more than warriors. They were logisticians, navigators, intelligence operatives, and strategists, all integrated into a cohesive and disciplined order. The combination of physical skill, mental acuity, spiritual fortitude, and operational knowledge ensured that the Templars could operate across Europe and the Holy Land with extraordinary efficiency, adaptability, and secrecy. They were capable of traversing forests, mountains, rivers, tunnels, and fortresses while maintaining discipline, secrecy, and operational coherence. A rare and formidable skill set that allowed the order to achieve influence and survival beyond that of ordinary medieval institutions. Through this comprehensive preparation, the Templars became an organization in which each member was simultaneously a soldier, a scholar, and a guardian of secrets. Training was not just instruction, it was transformation, creating knights capable of sustaining an invisible network that spanned continents, weathered political storms, and survived centuries of warfare, intrigue, and ambition. In this way, recruitment and training were the lifeblood of the order, ensuring that the Templars' presence, influence, and operations would endure long after the surface of Europe had changed. Supply lines were the invisible arteries that sustained the Templars' vast and intricate network, allowing knights, fortresses, and commanderies to function smoothly across Europe and the Holy Land. While most medieval armies struggled to maintain even basic provisions, the order had perfected a system of logistics that ensured weapons, food, and essential goods reached their destinations efficiently, securely, and often unnoticed. These supply lines were not mere routes. They were coordinated operations, carefully synchronized with rivers, roads, forests, mountains, and fortresses, forming an integrated web that made the order both resilient and adaptable. At the heart of these logistics were the commanderies, strategically located to serve as hubs for collection, storage, and redistribution. Each commandery maintained meticulous records of supplies, tracking everything from grain and wine to horses, weapons, and religious relics. These materials were stored in ways that maximized security and efficiency. Granaries protected against theft and spoilage, armories organized for rapid deployment, and hidden chambers reserved for the most valuable or sensitive items. The system ensured that knights could be provisioned quickly, whether for a local patrol, a regional campaign, or a mission across a distant territory. Supply routes themselves were carefully chosen and monitored. The Templars relied on multiple modes of transportation to move goods safely and discreetly. River networks allowed for fast, concealed shipment of bulk supplies. Mountain passes offered shortcuts invisible to rivals. Forest paths provided cover from prying eyes, and well-maintained roads ensured swift movement of carts and pack animals. Redundancy was built into the system. If one path became compromised due to enemy activity, weather, or political interference, alternate routes ensured continuity. Each shipment was planned with precision, taking into account terrain, season, and the potential for unexpected obstacles. The order's supply lines were also adaptive to environmental and seasonal challenges. During winter, frozen rivers or snow-blocked passes could disrupt conventional travel, but the Templars anticipated these events, prepositioning supplies at strategic locations and using specialized vehicles, sleds, or pack animals adapted to the conditions. In spring, floods or heavy rains could wash out roads or bridges, so shipments were timed to avoid natural hazards while maintaining operational continuity. This attention to seasonal patterns allowed the order to maintain a level of reliability and consistency that often surpassed secular authorities, whose operations were far more vulnerable to disruption. Coordination and communication were essential to the success of supply lines. Messengers and couriers moved ahead of shipments, signaling the status of routes, alerting recipients to expected arrival times, and conveying any changes in plans. Visual markers, discrete symbols, and coded signals were used to ensure that convoys could move safely without alerting outsiders. Within fortresses and commanderies, officers oversaw the flow of materials, directing resources where they were most needed while keeping the system flexible enough to respond to unforeseen demands. The integration of communication with logistics was a hallmark of the Templars' operational sophistication. Security was a constant concern. Convoys could be targeted by bandits, rival orders, or hostile forces, so the Templars often assigned armed escorts, employed diversionary tactics, or concealed shipments within innocuous cargo. Hidden storage areas along routes provided temporary safekeeping if delays or threats arose. These measures ensured that critical supplies reached their intended destinations intact and on time, reinforcing the perception of the order as both reliable and omnipresent. Security was not simply physical, it was strategic, leveraging secrecy, redundancy, and terrain to minimize risk. The psychological and strategic impact of efficient supply lines cannot be overstated. Allies knew that reinforcements and resources could arrive faster than expected, instilling confidence and loyalty. Enemies, on the other hand, perceived the order as resilient, capable of operating without interruption even when conventional forces faltered. Stories of Templar reinforcements arriving seemingly out of nowhere, fully equipped and ready for battle, circulated widely, enhancing the aura of mystique and power surrounding the order. Supply lines, therefore, were instruments of both practicality and perception, shaping outcomes before engagement even began. Integration with the Templars' broader network amplified the effectiveness of these logistics. Supply routes intersected with trade paths, river networks, forest roads, mountain passes, and fortresses, creating a system in which every element reinforced the others. A shipment might begin on a hidden forest path, transfer to a river barge, and end at a fortress where knights awaited deployment. Underground tunnels could bypass checkpoints or threaten regions entirely, ensuring continuity. This interconnectedness allowed the order to operate across vast and diverse landscapes, maintaining readiness, mobility, and secrecy simultaneously. Moreover, the Templars' supply network was not static. It evolved according to operational needs, political pressures, and environmental conditions. Records and intelligence from previous movements informed planning for future shipments. Observations of enemy activity or natural obstacles allowed for route adjustments. Seasonal variations were incorporated into strategic scheduling, and resource allocation was constantly optimized to ensure maximum efficiency. This dynamic adaptability made the network robust, capable of sustaining the order under conditions that would cripple less organized forces. Even today, traces of these logistical routes remain visible in the landscape. Old roadways, river docks, and storage facilities hint at the sophistication of Templar supply operations. Archaeological studies reveal hidden granaries, secret chambers, and tunnels used to move goods covertly, providing tangible evidence of a system that combined foresight, organization, and discipline. These remnants underscore the order's mastery of logistics, demonstrating how medieval knights could orchestrate operations with precision, secrecy, and strategic intelligence across vast distances. Ultimately, the Templars' supply lines were far more than mere channels for food and equipment. They were carefully designed networks that ensured survival, operational readiness, and influence. By mastering the movement of resources, the order transformed Europe into a landscape of controlled flow, where fortresses, rivers, roads, forests, and mountains all served the purpose of sustaining power and projecting presence. The efficiency, secrecy, and adaptability of these supply networks were critical to the Templars' ability to operate as a disciplined, continent-spanning organization, leaving a legacy that continues to fascinate historians, explorers, and enthusiasts alike. In essence, supply lines were the lifeblood of the Templars' hidden empire, connecting every node, sustaining every mission, and enabling the order to move with unparalleled precision, resilience, and influence across medieval Europe. The Templars' network of secret roads and hidden paths formed the veins through which the lifeblood of their order flowed, connecting castles, commanderies, fortresses, and supply depots across Europe with astonishing precision and secrecy. While ordinary travelers relied on main roads and established routes, the Order understood that predictability was vulnerability. To maintain operational security, they developed a parallel infrastructure of concealed routes, paths through forests, trails along mountains, and alleys within towns, that allowed them to move knights, supplies, messages, and treasure without drawing attention. These roads were not simply shortcuts. They were carefully mapped, maintained, and integrated into a network designed for flexibility, speed, and stealth. The creation of these hidden paths began with meticulous reconnaissance. Templars studied terrain, noting natural features that could provide concealment, observation points, or tactical advantage. Forests offered cover, rivers enabled discreet movement, and hills allowed visibility while remaining undetected. Every slope, bend, and ridge was evaluated for risk and opportunity, transforming the landscape into a living map of strategic possibilities. Routes were selected to minimize exposure to enemy forces, hostile territories, or even curious locals, while maximizing the ability to respond quickly to changing circumstances. This level of planning made movement along hidden paths almost invisible to outsiders, contributing to the aura of omnipresence the Order cultivated. Maintenance was equally critical. Trails had to remain navigable year-round, requiring clearing of undergrowth, repair of worn sections, and reinforcement of vulnerable points. In some cases, rudimentary markers were installed, stone cairns, carved notches, or subtly altered vegetation, to guide Templars without alerting the uninitiated. These markers were often encoded, with symbols or placements conveying specific information to trained members, such as direction, distance, or warnings of nearby dangers. Over time, these paths became living conduits, evolving in response to environmental changes, political pressures, and operational needs, all while remaining largely invisible to outsiders. Hidden roads were also strategically integrated with other elements of the Templars' network. Trails would connect mountain passes to river crossings, forests to castles, and tunnels to commanderies, creating a multi-layered system that allowed seamless movement across diverse terrain. This integration ensured redundancy. If one route became blocked or compromised, alternative paths allowed operations to continue without interruption. Such flexibility was essential for maintaining the Order's logistical, military, and communication capabilities, enabling them to sustain a level of mobility and efficiency that rival forces could not match. The human element was equally important. Couriers, knights, and supply carriers were trained to navigate these hidden paths with precision. They learned to move silently, conceal tracks, and maintain formation along difficult terrain. Some trails required knowledge of specific footholds, river fords, or natural cover that only Templars would recognize. This expertise allowed convoys to traverse long distances rapidly while avoiding detection, ensuring that essential materials, messages, and personnel reached their destinations safely and on schedule. In effect, the hidden roads turned ordinary geography into a strategic advantage, making movement predictable for the Order but unpredictable for outsiders. Secret routes also facilitated intelligence and reconnaissance operations. Scouts could move along these paths to observe enemy activity, gather information on terrain, or monitor trade and political developments without exposing themselves. Markers along the trails could signal conditions, hazards, or opportunities to other members, enabling coordinated action across multiple regions. The combination of physical secrecy and informational signaling created a network that functioned not only as a means of transportation but as an active tool of surveillance and strategic planning. The psychological impact of these hidden paths was significant. Rivals and enemies could never be sure where the Templars might appear, contributing to stories of knights suddenly emerging from forests or mountains when least expected. This unpredictability reinforced the Order's reputation for omnipresence and efficiency, often deterring interference or aggression. The existence of these concealed routes allowed the Templars to exert influence far beyond the visible scope of their fortresses, extending the reach of their authority without confrontation. Even today, fragments of these secret roads and trails can be traced through historical maps, archaeological findings, and the remnants of medieval infrastructure. In forests, Faint paths, stone markers, or subtle alterations in terrain hint at routes that have long been hidden from common knowledge. Riversides and hillsides, too, reveal indirect evidence of movement patterns designed for discretion. While the precise network may never be fully reconstructed, these traces speak to the sophistication and ambition of Templar logistics, strategy, and territorial understanding. Integration with supply lines, fortresses, and communication systems ensured that these hidden roads were more than isolated trails. They were a critical component of a continent-spanning network. Supplies, messages, and knights could move in a coordinated manner, bypassing hazards and remaining concealed from potential threats. The roads enabled flexibility in operations, adaptability to environmental and political shifts, and rapid response in times of crisis. Each hidden path was a small yet essential thread in the larger tapestry of Templar influence and efficiency. Ultimately, the Templars' hidden roads exemplified their mastery over terrain, secrecy, and movement. They transformed ordinary geography into a strategic asset, creating mobility that combined speed, discretion, and intelligence. These routes allowed the Order to operate across vast distances with precision, ensuring that their forces could appear when needed, move undetected, and maintain the flow of resources and information that sustained their power. In a world of uncertainty, the hidden roads offered control, resilience, and the extraordinary capacity to shape events from behind the scenes. Through this network of secret paths, the Templars demonstrated that mastery over the landscape could rival mastery over armies. Each road, trail, and concealed route was a lifeline, a conduit of influence, and a testament to the Order's understanding of strategy, logistics, and human movement. A silent yet powerful force that linked Europe into an invisible web of power and secrecy. The Templars' river networks were more than natural corridors. They were lifelines that connected fortresses, commanderies, and hidden routes across Europe with remarkable efficiency and secrecy. In a time when overland travel was slow, dangerous, and subject to unpredictable weather or bandit attacks, rivers offered both speed and concealment. The Order recognized early on that controlling water routes allowed them to move goods, personnel, and information rapidly while remaining largely invisible to outsiders. These waterways became the veins of a hidden system, linking distant points across the continent and enabling operations that few rivals could match. Navigating rivers required skill, foresight, and careful planning. Not every river was equally navigable. Seasonal changes in water levels, currents, and obstacles such as rocks, rapids, or fallen trees had to be accounted for. Templar navigators studied these variables meticulously, developing routes optimized for both speed and safety. Some rivers were suitable for heavy cargo, enabling the transport of grain, wine, weapons, or treasure, while narrower tributaries provided covert channels for couriers and reconnaissance teams. Knowledge of the water's behavior, combined with the ability to read currents and landmarks, gave the Order a strategic advantage in both logistics and mobility. Rivers also served as extensions of the Templars' hidden road system. Along their banks, discrete paths allowed movement between water and land routes, linking fortresses and commanderies to supply lines and secret trails. Hidden docks, concealed landings, and lightly fortified river posts ensured that shipments could be loaded or unloaded safely without attracting attention. In some cases, underground tunnels or hidden pathways led directly from rivers into castles, allowing goods or personnel to move unseen. The integration of water routes with land routes amplified the flexibility, redundancy, and resilience of the Order's network, ensuring that even disruptions in one mode of transport could be mitigated by alternatives. Security was a constant concern along rivers. Bandits, rival factions, or hostile forces could threaten convoys, making escort and concealment essential. The Templars often employed armed vessels or small contingents of knights to guard valuable shipments. In addition, cargo could be disguised among ordinary goods, or moved during times when observation by outsiders was minimal, such as dawn, dusk, or during poor weather conditions. These measures ensured that the Order's logistical operations remained reliable, even in regions where political or military control was contested. Rivers also functioned as channels of intelligence. Couriers could move along waterways more swiftly than overland messengers, carrying critical information between commanderies or fortresses. Observers along riverbanks monitored movements of rival forces, trade traffic, or local developments, reporting back to key nodes in the network. Waterways allowed the order to gather, transmit, and respond to intelligence efficiently, often arriving at strategic conclusions before rival factions could react. In this sense, rivers were both arteries of movement and conduits of awareness, enhancing operational reach and strategic foresight. Seasonal planning was essential to river navigation. Floods, droughts, ice, and storms could render certain routes impassable, so Templars prepared contingencies, stockpiled supplies, and adjusted schedules in advance. Hidden caches along riverbanks allowed teams to pause, regroup, or wait for safer conditions. By integrating environmental awareness into their operations, the order maintained continuity and resilience, turning natural obstacles into predictable elements of planning rather than unpredictable threats. The psychological effect of Templar mastery over rivers was significant. To locals and rivals, the order seemed omnipresent, capable of moving personnel and resources with uncanny efficiency. Stories circulated of convoys appearing along remote rivers or reinforcements arriving seemingly out of nowhere, reinforcing the aura of secrecy and power that surrounded the order. The perception of invisibility and omnipotence enhanced both loyalty among allies and caution among adversaries, allowing the Templars to operate with minimal direct confrontation. Control over rivers also reinforced economic influence. Many rivers were vital for trade and commerce, and by securing access points, docks, and strategic crossings, the Templars could facilitate or monitor the flow of goods. This allowed them to exert subtle influence over regional economies, supporting allies, deterring competitors, and ensuring that critical supplies reached their intended destinations. The waterways were not just logistical tools, they were instruments of strategy, diplomacy, and subtle power projection. Integration with fortresses, hidden paths, and supply lines ensured that river networks were not isolated assets but key components of a continent-spanning system. A shipment could move from a hidden forest path to a river dock, travel hundreds of kilometers, and arrive at a fortress ready for immediate deployment. Couriers could relay intelligence along rivers while armed convoys moved supplies, creating a dynamic, interwoven network in which multiple operations could occur simultaneously. This integration maximized efficiency, security, and operational reach, making the order a formidable, interconnected entity across Europe. Even today, remnants of Templar river networks are evident in old docks, traces of concealed landings, and historical accounts of secret river crossings. Archaeological findings reveal structures designed for concealment and security, testifying to the sophistication and foresight of the order's engineers and strategists. These traces underscore how rivers were transformed from natural features into strategic assets, integral to the invisible infrastructure that enabled the Templars to project power, maintain secrecy, and sustain operations across continents. Ultimately, Templar mastery of rivers demonstrates a profound understanding of both terrain and logistics. Waterways became more than transport routes. They were strategic corridors, intelligence channels, and instruments of influence. By controlling rivers, the order ensured mobility, secrecy, and operational resilience, linking Europe and the Holy Land in a hidden network of extraordinary sophistication. The rivers were the veins through which the lifeblood of the Templars flowed, sustaining, connecting, and empowering an organization whose reach and efficiency would remain unparalleled in medieval history. Mountain passes were among the most treacherous and strategically valuable elements of the Templars' hidden network. While rivers and roads offered speed and accessibility, mountains presented both obstacles and opportunities. The order recognized early on that control over passes could determine the movement of armies, the security of supply lines, and the secrecy of their operations. Narrow, winding trails high above valleys could serve as shortcuts invisible to rivals, as surveillance points offering unparalleled observation, or as choke points where the order could control or monitor traffic. The mastery of these rugged terrains became a hallmark of Templar ingenuity and adaptability, transforming natural barriers into strategic advantages. Navigating mountain passes required meticulous planning and specialized skills. Unlike open plains or riverbanks, high-altitude trails were unpredictable, subject to sudden weather changes, landslides, or snow. Templar guides were trained to read the terrain, identify safe paths, and anticipate natural hazards. They studied rock formations, water sources, and animal tracks to chart routes that minimized risk and maximized concealment. Each pass was mapped with precision, not only for the movement of goods and troops but also for communication, reconnaissance, and intelligence gathering. These routes were living systems, constantly evaluated and adjusted to respond to environmental, political, and military conditions. The physical demands of mountain travel were considerable. Knights, couriers, and supply carriers had to traverse steep slopes, narrow ledges, and unstable terrain while carrying weapons, provisions, or cargo. Pack animals were employed in some regions, but often only light loads could be transported safely. Winter added layers of difficulty. Snow, ice, and avalanches could block paths or endanger travelers. The Templars mitigated these challenges through training, timing, and preparation, ensuring that even the most formidable terrain could be crossed without compromising operational efficiency. The combination of endurance, skill, and discipline allowed them to move where ordinary travelers would hesitate, giving the order an unmatched level of mobility and secrecy. Mountain passes were also essential for intelligence and surveillance. From elevated vantage points, Templars could observe enemy movements, monitor trade routes, or survey surrounding territories. Hidden observation posts were established along key routes, sometimes reinforced with small fortifications or shelters that allowed scouts to remain undetected for extended periods. Signals, fires, flags, or coded markers could communicate information across valleys or along the mountainside, linking distant nodes of the Order's network. In this way, passes served as both transit routes and observation platforms, multiplying the effectiveness of the Templars' logistics, intelligence, and communication systems. Security along mountain routes was paramount. Narrow trails could be blocked or ambushed, and the risk of natural hazards required constant vigilance. The Order implemented measures such as sending advance scouts, establishing concealed checkpoints, and using decoys to protect convoys. Knowledge of hidden caves, ledges, and alternate routes allowed them to evade detection or escape in emergencies. The combination of preparation, terrain familiarity, and strategic foresight transformed potentially perilous paths into secure conduits for movement, supply, and information. Integration with the broader network made mountain passes indispensable. They connected hidden roads, river networks, and fortresses, creating continuity across diverse terrain. Supplies transported along forest trails could transfer to mountain paths, then continue via river networks, linking distant commanderies with minimal exposure. Couriers could traverse passes to relay intelligence rapidly, and knights could move between strategic locations with relative invisibility. This multimodal integration reinforced redundancy, flexibility, and resilience, allowing the Order to maintain operations even when individual routes were blocked or compromised. The psychological impact of controlling mountain passes was significant. Local populations, rival forces, and even allied factions often marveled at the Templars' ability to appear unexpectedly in remote areas or deliver resources through seemingly impassable terrain. Tales of knights moving across snowbound passes, carrying critical supplies or reinforcements, reinforced the perception of omnipresence and invincibility. These stories enhanced the Order's reputation, instilling confidence among allies and caution among adversaries. Templar mastery of mountains also extended to construction and fortification. Small outposts, watchtowers, and hidden shelters were strategically placed along passes to support operations, store supplies, or provide refuge. These installations were often inconspicuous, blending into the landscape while serving operational purposes. Their presence ensured continuity of supply and communication, enabling sustained movement through difficult terrain while minimizing risk. Even today, remnants of Templar use of mountain passes can be traced in old paths, hidden stairways, and fortifications. Archaeological and historical evidence reveals the ingenuity with which the Order adapted natural landscapes to operational needs, integrating physical endurance, observation, and strategic foresight. These passes were more than routes. They were strategic tools that allowed the Templars to control movement, gather intelligence, and sustain operations across Europe with unparalleled efficiency. Ultimately, mountain passes exemplify the Templars' ability to turn obstacles into advantages. They combined discipline, training, intelligence, and environmental awareness to navigate and control these rugged corridors, integrating them seamlessly into a continent-spanning network. By mastering high-altitude terrain, the Order ensured operational resilience, mobility, and secrecy, transforming mountains from barriers into instruments of power that enabled the Templars to operate with near-invisible precision across Europe. Through their command of mountain passes, the Templars demonstrated that mastery of the landscape, combined with strategy, foresight, and adaptability, could extend influence far beyond the visible scope of their fortresses. Each pass, trail, and hidden route became a critical thread in a vast, interconnected web, sustaining the Order's operations, projecting authority, and ensuring that no terrain was too formidable to traverse or too remote to control. The Templars' forests were far more than dense patches of trees. They were strategic assets, natural fortresses, and secret highways woven into the Order's hidden network. In medieval Europe, forests represented both danger and opportunity. They could conceal bandits and enemy patrols. Yet, in the hands of the Templars, they became tools of movement, observation, and secrecy. The Order understood that controlling, mapping, and navigating these woodlands gave them an extraordinary tactical advantage, allowing supplies, messages, and personnel to traverse long distances undetected while enabling scouts to monitor activity without exposure. Forests were living conduits of the Templars' influence, blending natural geography with human ingenuity. Templars trained extensively to move through forests with precision and stealth. They learned to read subtle signs in the environment, broken twigs, disturbed soil, or altered vegetation, that indicated the presence of hidden markers, potential hazards, or enemy activity. Couriers could travel quietly along concealed paths, using natural cover to avoid detection, while knights transporting supplies were trained to minimize tracks and leave no trace of movement. This mastery of woodland navigation allowed the Order to maintain operational security, ensuring that even long-distance travel could occur without alerting outsiders to their routes or intentions. Hidden paths through forests were meticulously planned and maintained. Some trails followed natural contours, using underbrush and tree lines to conceal movement. Others incorporated small bridges over streams, camouflaged crossings, or hidden clearings where supplies or personnel could rest safely. These routes were often marked subtly, with carved notches, arranged stones, or other discrete signs that only Templars could interpret. Over time, the Order's forest paths became a complex web of channels, connecting castles, fortresses, river networks, and mountain passes, ensuring that every element of the network could communicate and operate seamlessly. Forests also served as natural surveillance zones. Observation points were established at elevated clearings or within dense stands of trees, allowing scouts to monitor enemy activity, track trade caravans, or observe rival factions. Signals, fires, flags, or coded arrangements of natural elements could be transmitted from one point to another, relaying intelligence quickly across regions. This combination of concealment and communication allowed the Templars to act with foresight, preparing for potential threats or logistical needs long before rivals could respond. Forests were thus both protective and proactive components of the Order's operational infrastructure. Supply lines within forests were carefully coordinated. Hidden caches stored food, weapons, and other essentials, enabling convoys to travel long distances without reliance on exposed settlements. Knights could resupply discreetly, while messengers could pause safely without risk of interception. The placement of these caches required knowledge of seasonal changes, wildlife behavior, and terrain stability, ensuring that stored resources remained secure and usable. These forest supply networks were vital to sustaining operations, particularly in remote or contested regions where conventional infrastructure was unreliable or hostile forces were present. Security within forests was enhanced by Templar vigilance and discipline. Patrols, scouts, and advance parties moved ahead of larger groups to detect threats and prepare the safest routes. Ambushes or diversions could be executed if needed, protecting convoys or observers. The dense canopy and natural obstacles, once mastered, became allies, enabling stealthy movement and protection from observation. Forests, in the hands of the Order, became living shields that enhanced both defensive and offensive capabilities. The psychological impact of forest mastery was profound. To outsiders, the Templars seemed to appear and disappear at will, moving through impenetrable woods with seeming invisibility. Tales circulated of knights emerging from dense forests precisely when needed, whether to deliver reinforcements, transport treasures, or intercept rival forces. This aura of omnipresence reinforced the Order's mystique, bolstering the confidence of allies and the caution of enemies. The forests, therefore, were both practical tools and instruments of influence, shaping perception as much as action. Integration with rivers, mountain passes, hidden roads, and fortresses made forests essential connectors in the Templars' continental network. Supplies could move from a hidden forest path to a mountain pass, then to a river, and finally into a fortress or commandery, all while remaining largely undetected. Couriers could relay intelligence across these routes, and knights could deploy where needed with speed and discretion. The forests were thus not isolated zones but critical nodes in a dynamic, interwoven system of movement, observation, and supply. Even today, remnants of these forest networks endure. Subtle pathways, hidden clearings, and concealed markers hint at the sophistication of Templar operations within wooded landscapes. Archaeological and historical studies reveal evidence of secret trails, camouflaged storage sites, and observation points that testify to the strategic use of forests. These traces demonstrate how the Order transformed natural environments into integral components of their hidden empire, blending human ingenuity with the geography of Europe to create mobility, secrecy, and influence. Ultimately, the forests were living instruments of the Templars' power, providing concealment, connectivity, and strategic advantage. They enabled movement that was fast, secure, and nearly invisible, supported supply networks, facilitated intelligence gathering, and reinforced the perception of omnipresence. By mastering these landscapes, the Order transformed ordinary woodlands into essential tools of operational supremacy, ensuring that Europe's forests became not obstacles to overcome, but pathways of control, secrecy, and influence. Through their command of forests, the Templars demonstrated that geography could be weaponized, logistics could be hidden in plain sight, and mastery over natural landscapes could amplify both operational efficiency and psychological impact. Each wooded path, hidden glade, and camouflaged observation point was a thread in a vast, invisible web, sustaining the Order's influence and ensuring that their presence could be felt, even when unseen. The Templars' castles and fortresses were the crown jewels of their hidden network, serving as both bastions of defense and hubs of command, supply, and intelligence. Unlike ordinary medieval fortifications, Templar castles were designed not only to repel invaders but also to integrate seamlessly with the surrounding landscape, hidden routes, and secret passages that ensured operational flexibility and security. Each fortress was carefully sited, on hilltops for visibility, along rivers for transport, near forests for concealment, or at mountain passes to control access, demonstrating a strategic understanding of terrain, geography, and human movement that was far ahead of its time. Construction and architecture were guided by both practicality and secrecy. Walls were thick and angled for maximum defense. Gates were reinforced and guarded, yet often concealed within complex approaches that obscured the main entrance. Hidden staircases, secret chambers, and subterranean passages allowed movement of supplies, reinforcements, or intelligence without detection. Many fortresses included concealed storage areas for treasure, weapons, and sensitive documents, ensuring that even in the event of siege or infiltration, the Order's operations could continue with minimal disruption. The combination of visible strength and hidden functionality gave Templar fortresses a dual purpose: deterrence and concealment. Fortresses also functioned as command centers, coordinating regional networks of supply lines, hidden roads, rivers, and forests. Knights stationed at these sites managed logistics, relayed intelligence, and oversaw communication across connected nodes. Couriers could arrive at a castle by secret path or river, deliver messages, and depart without leaving a trace. Supply convoys could restock provisions or weapons before moving to the next node, while scouts could be dispatched to monitor activity along hidden routes. This centralization of operational control within fortified locations allowed the order to maintain coherence and efficiency across vast distances, making castles critical linchpins in their continent-spanning network. Security was layered and multifaceted. External defenses, moats, walls, and towers, protected against conventional assault, while internal defenses, hidden doors, escape tunnels, and trap mechanisms ensured continued operation if outer defenses were breached. Observation posts and watchtowers provided early warning, while secret exits allowed stealthy movement in or out of the fortress. This redundancy and adaptability meant that Templar fortresses could survive sieges, attacks, or infiltration attempts, preserving both personnel and resources. Every architectural detail was deliberate, balancing the need for visibility, protection, and concealment. The psychological impact of these fortresses was profound. To locals, allies, and enemies alike, Templar castles projected power, discipline, and reliability. They were symbols of the order's permanence, authority, and preparedness, often strategically placed to dominate the surrounding landscape visually and psychologically. Stories of knights emerging from fortified castles to deliver reinforcements, intercept enemy movements, or protect caravans enhanced the aura of invincibility and omnipresence. This perception reinforced loyalty among allies and caution among rivals, making fortresses as much instruments of influence as they were of defense. Fortresses also supported intelligence operations. Hidden chambers, observation posts, and secure meeting rooms allowed the collection, storage, and transmission of sensitive information. Couriers could be dispatched discreetly, maps and plans stored securely, and reconnaissance coordinated across multiple regions. Fortresses functioned as nerve centers where knowledge, strategy, and logistics converged, ensuring that the order could respond effectively to threats or opportunities. By combining defensive architecture with operational coordination, the Templars maximized the strategic utility of each fortress. Integration with other elements of the network amplified fortress utility. Hidden roads, forest paths, mountain passes, and river networks all converged on these hubs, allowing movement and communication that was both rapid and concealed. Supplies could arrive undetected, messages transmitted without interception, and personnel deployed efficiently. The fortresses were not isolated. They were dynamic components of an interconnected system, ensuring continuity of operations even when individual routes or regions were compromised. Maintenance and adaptability were critical. Castles were continually repaired, reinforced, and expanded as operational needs evolved. Secret passages were modified or added, storage areas relocated, and defensive mechanisms upgraded to respond to new threats. The Templars' ability to adapt architecture to both strategic and environmental changes reflected their forward-thinking approach to logistics, security, and operational sustainability. Even today, remnants of Templar fortresses reveal their sophistication. Thick walls, hidden chambers, subterranean passages, and strategic placements attest to the ingenuity, foresight, and discipline of the order. Archaeological evidence and historical records provide insight into how these fortresses functioned as nodes in a larger, hidden network, linking movement, supply, intelligence, and command into a seamless system that spanned Europe and the Holy Land. Ultimately, Templar castles were far more than military strongholds. They were multifunctional hubs that embodied the order's philosophy of secrecy, efficiency, and control. They protected personnel and resources, coordinated complex networks, facilitated movement and intelligence gathering, and projected authority across the landscape. Through careful planning, strategic placement, and architectural ingenuity, the Templars transformed fortresses into instruments of power that were as effective psychologically as they were physically, ensuring the resilience, reach, and influence of their order across centuries. By mastering both the visible and hidden aspects of fortification, the Templars demonstrated that true power lay not only in swords or numbers, but in the intelligent integration of landscape, architecture, and operational networks, turning castles into living, breathing centers of influence, control, and secrecy that shaped history from behind their walls. The Templars' covert communication systems were among the most vital and sophisticated elements of their hidden network, allowing the order to coordinate operations across vast distances, while maintaining secrecy from rivals, monarchs, and even kings. In an era when written correspondence could be intercepted and messengers captured, the Templars developed a combination of encoded messages, visual signals, and oral traditions to ensure that critical information moved swiftly, securely, and reliably. These systems were not merely functional. They were strategic instruments that enabled the order to act with foresight, respond rapidly to threats, and maintain cohesion across Europe and the Holy Land. Encoded messages formed a cornerstone of Templar communication. Letters and documents were often written in ciphers, symbols, or codes known only to trained members. Knowledge of these codes was carefully restricted, passed orally or through mentorship rather than in written form, reducing the risk of compromise. Even if a document fell into enemy hands, without the key to its code, the information was effectively useless. This attention to secrecy extended to all forms of correspondence, from instructions to supply requests, ensuring that operations could continue unimpeded even in contested or hostile regions. Visual signals were another crucial method. The Templars employed fire, smoke, flags, banners, and other markers to transmit messages across distances too great for verbal communication. These signals were often highly coded. A particular arrangement of banners or the timing of a torch could convey complex instructions, alerts, or confirmations. Observation points were strategically located on hilltops, along mountain passes, and near fortresses to maximize the visibility and effectiveness of these signals. This system allowed rapid coordination of forces, supply movements, and intelligence gathering across terrain that would have slowed ordinary communication methods. Oral traditions also played a significant role. Knowledge of routes, landmarks, and operational procedures was frequently passed down verbally, reinforced by training and repetition. Couriers and knights memorized critical information about hidden paths, river routes, mountain passes, and forest trails, reducing reliance on written records that could be discovered or destroyed. Oral transmission ensured that even in the event of sieges, captures, or the loss of documents, operational knowledge could be retained and conveyed securely to the next generation of members. Redundancy and adaptability were key principles in Templar communication. Multiple channels, written ciphers, visual signals, and oral instructions were often used in parallel, ensuring that if one method was compromised, others could maintain continuity. Routes and methods were also flexible. A message could travel through a river network, a hidden forest path, or via a chain of trusted couriers depending on terrain, political conditions, or threats. This flexibility allowed the order to operate reliably in a wide variety of contexts, from peaceful commanderies to contested territories rife with conflict and surveillance. The network's integration with the Templars' physical infrastructure enhanced its efficiency. Fortresses, observation posts, hidden roads, forests, rivers, and mountain passes were all nodes in a larger communication web. Messages could be relayed from a secluded fortress to a mountain lookout, then down a forest path to a river dock, arriving at a distant commandery in a matter of days or hours instead of weeks. This integration amplified both speed and security, creating a resilient system that could withstand environmental obstacles, political interference, or enemy attempts to intercept or disrupt communications. Psychological impact was an important dimension of these communication networks. The ability of the Templars to appear suddenly, respond rapidly, or act in coordinated ways seemed almost supernatural to allies and adversaries alike. Stories circulated of knights anticipating events, arriving just in time, or delivering reinforcements exactly when needed, reinforcing the perception of omnipresence and strategic mastery. These perceptions were not accidental. They were cultivated through the careful orchestration of communication, logistics, and movement, enhancing the order's influence and deterrence without direct confrontation. Training ensured the effectiveness of these systems. Knights and couriers underwent rigorous preparation in reading codes, interpreting signals, memorizing routes, and transmitting messages accurately. Mistakes could jeopardize missions, so precision, discipline, and secrecy were drilled into every member. This emphasis on reliability created a network in which information flowed efficiently, securely, and consistently, maintaining operational coherence across continents. Even today, evidence of Templar communication methods can be glimpsed in hidden chambers, symbolic markers, and cryptic inscriptions found in castles, fortresses, and churches. Archaeological findings suggest the presence of encoded messages, visual signaling points, and memorized logistical knowledge that allowed the order to sustain operations in secrecy. These traces provide insight into a system that combined ingenuity, discipline, and foresight, allowing the Templars to operate as a near-invisible, yet highly effective organization. Ultimately, the Templars' communication networks were the nervous system of their hidden empire, transmitting intelligence, orders, and coordination with precision and discretion. By mastering encoded messages, visual signaling, and oral transmission, the order ensured operational continuity, rapid response, and strategic advantage. Communication was not merely functional. It was a force multiplier, amplifying the impact of supply lines, hidden roads, rivers, forests, and fortresses. Through these systems, the Templars achieved cohesion across vast distances, secrecy in hostile environments, and a reputation for near-omniscient awareness. Their mastery of communication allowed them to act as a single, coordinated entity despite geographic dispersion, transforming Europe into a landscape in which movement, information, and influence could be controlled with unprecedented precision. In essence, Templar communication was the invisible thread that wove together the entire network, sustaining the order's power, secrecy, and reach across centuries. The Templars' network of couriers was the lifeblood that carried intelligence, instructions, and resources across vast distances with remarkable speed and discretion. In a time when roads were perilous, rivers unpredictable, and mountains forbidding, these men and women, though primarily knights, were trained messengers, adept at navigating hidden roads, forest paths, mountain passes, and river networks. Their role extended beyond mere delivery. They were the eyes, ears, and often the decision-makers in small, critical situations. A courier could observe enemy movements, assess the safety of supply routes, and adapt on the fly, making them indispensable to the operational cohesion of the order. Training was rigorous and highly specialized. Couriers were taught to memorize routes, landmarks, and secret codes, relying on their wits as much as on written instructions. Stealth and endurance were paramount. They moved silently through forests, scaled mountain passes, and crossed rivers under cover of darkness when necessary. Pack animals were used for heavier loads, but many couriers traveled light to maintain speed and agility. Even the most treacherous terrain became navigable through experience, planning, and an intimate understanding of the landscape. Each journey required preparation, strategy, and adaptability, as unforeseen obstacles, bandits, rival orders, political interference, or natural hazards were constant threats. The Templars' courier system was deeply integrated with the rest of their hidden network. Messages and small shipments could travel from a fortress to a river dock, then via hidden forest path to a mountain pass, reaching a distant commandery in a matter of days instead of weeks. Routes were chosen for both efficiency and security, often changing to avoid detection or interception. Couriers were also responsible for coordinating with local contacts, observing the condition of hidden roads and supply caches, and ensuring that intelligence reached the right hands without compromise. This integration ensured redundancy and reliability, allowing the order to operate effectively even in hostile or contested territories. Couriers were trained in the use of signals and codes to communicate covertly. Small markers, carved symbols, or natural arrangements, such as stacked stones or bent branches, could indicate safe passage, potential danger, or instructions for others in the network. They carried encoded messages that only trained members could decipher, ensuring that sensitive information remained secure even if intercepted. In addition, visual signals from observation posts, fires, or flags could coordinate larger movements, allowing couriers to deliver instructions rapidly over long distances without exposing themselves unnecessarily. The psychological impact of the courier system was profound. Allies relied on the speed and reliability of the network, confident that messages and resources would arrive on time. Enemies, on the other hand, could never be certain where the order would appear next, reinforcing the perception of omnipresence and strategic foresight. Tales of Templar reinforcements or critical messages arriving at exactly the right moment circulated widely, enhancing both the mystique and authority of the order. The courier's effectiveness transformed communication from a simple logistical task into a strategic instrument of influence and deterrence. Couriers were also vital to intelligence operations. They could relay observations about enemy movements, political developments, or local conditions, allowing the order to adapt and respond proactively. Some were tasked with reconnaissance missions, gathering information along forest paths, mountain passes, or river routes, and reporting back to fortresses or commanderies. The combination of observation, reporting, and delivery made couriers the operational nerve endings of the order, providing real-time data that shaped decision-making and ensured the fluid functioning of the hidden network. Redundancy was a key principle in the courier system. Multiple couriers could be dispatched with the same message or resource along different routes, ensuring that even if one were intercepted, another would succeed. Routes were flexible, adapting to seasonal changes, natural obstacles, or enemy activity. This flexibility and layered security made the network resilient, capable of functioning reliably under pressure, and contributed to the Templars' reputation for efficiency and near-omniscience in both logistics and strategy. Integration with hidden roads, forest paths, rivers, mountain passes, and fortified castles enhanced the courier's effectiveness. They were not isolated travelers but part of a synchronized system that connected every node of the order's network. Each fortress, observation point, and supply cache became a waypoint for couriers, providing safety, resupply, and strategic coordination. This interconnectedness ensured that messages, intelligence, and resources could traverse hundreds of miles quickly, securely, and predictably within the order system, while remaining invisible to outsiders. Even today, remnants of the courier network can be traced in old forest paths, mountain trails, and river routes that intersected with Templar strongholds. Historical accounts describe the speed, skill, and reliability of these messengers, while archaeological evidence hints at concealed waypoints, markers, and caches used to support long-distance travel. Together, these traces reveal a system of movement and communication that was sophisticated, disciplined, and remarkably effective for its time. Ultimately, the Templars' couriers exemplify the human element of the Order's hidden network. They were the lifelines connecting fortresses, hidden roads, rivers, forests, and mountain passes, ensuring that the Order could act as a single, coordinated entity across vast distances. Through skill, discipline, and strategic integration, these messengers transformed intelligence, communication, and logistics into a seamless system that amplified the Templars' power, secrecy, and influence throughout Europe and the Holy Land. By mastering the art of movement, observation, and secure delivery, the Templars' couriers ensured that no message was lost, no supply delayed, and no intelligence unnoticed. They were the silent, invisible force that kept the Order functioning, coordinated, and omnipresent. A testament to the Templars' ability to weave human skill, geography, and strategy into a hidden network of extraordinary efficiency and enduring mystery. The Templars' treasure and resource networks were the backbone that sustained their operations, granting the Order financial independence, strategic flexibility, and influence that extended far beyond their castles and fortresses. Gold, silver, precious stones, and other valuable commodities were not only wealth but also tools of power. They financed armies, maintained fortifications, supported covert operations, and enabled the Order to intervene politically, economically, and militarily across Europe and the Holy Land. What set the Templars apart was not merely their possession of treasure, but the sophisticated, secretive systems they developed to store, transport, and protect these assets, often hidden in plain sight yet virtually impossible for outsiders to access. The management of treasure relied on an intricate combination of concealed caches, fortified strongholds, and trusted personnel. Wealth could be stored in castle vaults, underground chambers, or hidden compartments within fortresses, often connected to secret passageways or tunnels for rapid, undetected access. These locations were carefully selected based on security, discretion, and proximity to operational centers. Some caches were mobile, designed to be relocated quickly in times of danger or political upheaval, ensuring that the order's resources remained secure even if a fortress were compromised. Transporting treasure required precision, planning, and discretion. Couriers, knights, and specialized teams were trained to move valuables using hidden roads, forest paths, mountain passes, and rivers, often under the cover of night or adverse weather to reduce the risk of interception. Shipments could be disguised as ordinary goods, divided into multiple consignments along different routes, or carried using specialized containers designed to resist tampering. The integration of physical geography with operational skill allowed the Templars to move vast quantities of wealth with remarkable security and efficiency. Rivers and hidden waterways were particularly valuable for transporting treasure. Boats could carry heavy cargo over long distances faster than land routes and with reduced exposure to bandits or rival factions. Concealed river docks, camouflaged landing points, and secure storage along riverbanks ensured that shipments could be transferred discreetly, maintaining both speed and security. In some cases, treasure was moved from river to forest or hidden road routes, linking the order's network into a seamless system of mobility, concealment, and redundancy. The use of coded records and secure communication was essential to managing resources. Only trusted members knew the precise locations, quantities, and movement schedules of the order's wealth. Ciphers, coded symbols, and oral transmission ensured that even if a document fell into enemy hands, the treasure's existence, location, and purpose remained concealed. Couriers and knights carrying information about resources were carefully selected, trained, and often rotated to minimize exposure. The result was a system that was both resilient and invisible, capable of sustaining operations across hundreds of miles with minimal risk. Forests, mountain passes, and hidden roads were integral to treasure logistics. Supplies and wealth moved along these paths, often in coordination with other operational movements, allowing the order to synchronize the flow of resources, personnel, and intelligence. Hidden caches in forests or caves provided emergency reserves, while mountain trails offered discreet shortcuts or escape routes if a convoy was threatened. This combination of natural concealment and strategic planning allowed the Templars to operate with remarkable flexibility and security. Fortresses and castles played a dual role in the management of treasure. They were not only defensive structures but also storage hubs where valuables could be held safely while remaining accessible for operational use. Subterranean chambers, hidden stairways, and secret vaults ensured that even if outer defenses were breached, the order's wealth could be protected or moved swiftly. These fortresses were strategically placed along key routes, integrating treasure storage with the broader network of rivers, roads, forests, and passes to maintain both security and operational efficiency. The psychological impact of the Templars' treasure system was significant. The order's ability to mobilize resources seemingly at will, fund armies, build fortifications, and influence political developments contributed to their aura of power and invincibility. Stories circulated of knights delivering funds or supplies just when needed, reinforcing the perception that the Templars were omnipresent, well-resourced, and always prepared. Wealth was thus both a practical tool and a symbol of authority, shaping perception as much as enabling action. Even today, traces of the Templars' treasure networks intrigue historians and archaeologists. Hidden vaults, underground passages, and coded records hint at the sophisticated logistics that allowed the order to sustain operations across Europe and the Holy Land. While much remains lost to history, surviving documentation and structural evidence reveal a system designed for secrecy, resilience, and efficiency, demonstrating the order's mastery over both wealth and geography. Ultimately, the Templars' treasure and resource networks exemplify the fusion of strategy, secrecy, and operational skill. By controlling, moving, and safeguarding wealth with precision, the order ensured its ability to act independently, sustain military and logistical operations, and influence events across continents. The system was not merely about accumulation. It was an essential instrument of power, enabling the Templars to project authority, maintain secrecy, and operate with flexibility and resilience in a complex and often hostile world. Through their management of treasure, the Templars demonstrated that wealth, when combined with secrecy, planning, and integration into a hidden network, could become a force multiplier. Every hidden cache, guarded transport route, and secure vault was a thread in the vast, invisible web of the Order's power, sustaining its reach, secrecy, and influence across centuries. A reminder that in the hands of the Templars, money was not only a resource but a weapon, a tool, and a means of survival and domination. The Templars' enduring mysteries are woven from the threads of secrecy, strategy, and influence that spanned continents and centuries. Long after their official dissolution, the Order's hidden networks of roads, rivers, forests, mountain passes, fortresses, communication systems, couriers, and treasure routes have continued to fascinate historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts alike. These mysteries are not simply tales of lost wealth or secret passages. They reflect an organization that mastered secrecy, logistics, and human psychology, leaving behind traces that are tantalizing, often contradictory, and difficult to fully interpret. The allure of the Templars lies in their ability to operate in plain sight while remaining virtually invisible, a paradox that continues to capture the imagination. One of the most intriguing aspects is the question of what the Templars truly left behind. While documents, ruins, and scattered artifacts provide glimpses of their operations, the full extent of their networks and holdings remains elusive. Scholars debate whether the Order's wealth was hidden in secret vaults, transported out of Europe, or dispersed among allied institutions. Some propose that coded documents still exist, their meaning obscured by centuries of lost keys and linguistic evolution. Others suggest that natural landscapes, forests, rivers, and mountains may still conceal remnants of paths, markers, and structures, silently preserving the operational genius of the Order. The ambiguity fuels speculation, as every discovery seems to raise new questions rather than provide definitive answers. Templar myths and legends also contribute to the mystique. Tales of hidden treasures, sacred relics, and secret knowledge have persisted for centuries, blending historical facts with imagination. While some stories may be exaggerated, they are rooted in real operational strategies. Fortresses designed for secrecy, courier networks that enabled near-instantaneous communication, and routes that allowed undetected movement across Europe. These factual foundations lend credibility to legend, creating a powerful interplay between history and myth that continues to captivate public imagination. The psychological and cultural impact of the Templar secrets is profound. Their reputation for omnipresence, efficiency, and wealth inspired both awe and fear, influencing political decisions, military strategies, and public perceptions. Even after the Order's suppression, their influence lingered in legal, economic, and architectural legacies. Hidden roads and fortified locations became part of local lore. Codes, symbols, and marks embedded in castles and churches continued to puzzle observers. In many ways, the Templars' ability to operate discreetly while leaving enduring marks on the landscape ensured that their presence persisted in subtle but powerful ways. Modern exploration and research continue to uncover hints of their operational genius. Archaeologists find remnants of fortresses, hidden paths, and river docks that align with historical records of Templar activity. Historical documents occasionally reveal coded instructions, financial records, or correspondence that suggests sophisticated networks of resource management and communication. Even in contemporary analysis, the Templars demonstrate remarkable foresight in integrating terrain, logistics, and human factors into a system that functioned as a single, cohesive entity across hundreds of miles. Each discovery, however small, reinforces the sense that the Order's strategies were far ahead of their time. Yet, the greatest mystery remains the purpose and legacy of the Templars' hidden networks. Were they purely practical, designed to protect wealth, supplies, and personnel? Or did they serve a broader, more symbolic function, projecting power, inspiring fear, and cultivating an aura of invincibility that extended influence beyond physical assets? Perhaps the genius of the Order lay in the intersection of practicality and perception. An operational network that functioned flawlessly while also shaping how people, both allies and enemies, understood their presence. The duality of utility and mystique is what continues to enthrall scholars and storytellers alike. Reflection on the Templars' enduring mysteries invites us to reconsider how history is constructed and remembered. The order demonstrates that the true measure of power lies not only in visible conquest or accumulated wealth, but also in the ability to shape perception, manage complex systems, and operate with foresight and discretion. Every hidden road, forest path, mountain pass, fortress, courier route, and concealed cache was a testament to the Order's integrated approach to strategy, secrecy, and influence. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond the obvious, to read the subtle cues in landscape, architecture, and records, and to appreciate the sophistication of an organization that mastered both action and invisibility. Ultimately, the Templars' hidden networks are more than historical curiosities. They are a reminder of what can be achieved through discipline, intelligence, and vision. Their story encourages reflection on the nature of secrecy, the interplay between perception and reality, and the ways in which human ingenuity can leave an indelible mark on the world, even when hidden from view. As we trace the remnants of their paths, fortresses, and systems, we are confronted with the enduring question: what other secrets might history conceal, waiting for the discerning eye to uncover? The legacy of the Templars invites us to imagine a Europe threaded with invisible lines of movement, guarded wealth, and coordinated intelligence. A continent in which a single, disciplined order could operate with precision and secrecy across hundreds of miles. It leaves us with the subtle but profound reflection that history is not only the story of what is seen but also the story of what is hidden, and that understanding the invisible threads may change the way we perceive the past, the present, and perhaps even our own capacity for ingenuity and strategic mastery. The legacy of the Templars is a tapestry woven from courage, secrecy, strategy, and vision, leaving an indelible mark on history that continues to intrigue scholars, explorers, and enthusiasts alike. Even after the Order's official dissolution in the early 14th century, the systems they built, the hidden roads, river networks, forest paths, mountain passes, fortresses, communication channels, courier lines, and treasure caches, left traces that speak of a sophistication unparalleled in medieval Europe. These remnants are not merely physical structures. They are evidence of a mindset that combined discipline, foresight, and audacity, enabling a relatively small organization to wield influence across continents while remaining shrouded in mystery. The Templars' legacy is perhaps most striking in their ability to harmonize the visible and the invisible. Fortresses and castles projected strength, order, and permanence, deterring enemies and inspiring loyalty, while hidden passages, secret chambers, and underground vaults allowed them to operate undetected. Forests, rivers, and mountain passes were transformed into instruments of mobility, observation, and security, blending natural landscapes with human ingenuity. Even the smallest details, coded documents, subtle markers along trails, or strategic placement of supply caches, reflect a deliberate, comprehensive approach to sustaining operations and projecting power without exposure. Their influence extended far beyond military and logistical efficiency. Economically, the Templars controlled vast networks of resources, enabling them to fund campaigns, support allies, and influence local economies. Politically, their presence affected decisions made by kings, nobles, and clergy, often without direct confrontation. Intellectually and culturally, the Order fostered innovation in architecture, engineering, navigation, and communication, leaving a legacy that would ripple through centuries. Their mastery of both human and natural systems exemplifies a holistic approach to power. It was not merely about control, but about foresight, integration, and adaptability. Even today, the Templars' hidden networks continue to fascinate because they defy simple explanation. Archaeologists uncover hidden chambers and pathways. Historians decipher coded correspondence. Explorers trace forgotten forest paths and river routes. Yet for every mystery solved, more questions arise. How extensive were their continental networks? Where did their treasures ultimately end up? What secrets remain hidden beneath the landscape, waiting to be rediscovered? The enduring enigma of the Templars lies not in a single answer, but in the ongoing interplay between what is known, what is hypothesized, and what remains concealed. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Templar legacy is its demonstration of human ingenuity under constraints. The Order operated in a world of political intrigue, religious scrutiny, and constant threat, yet they developed systems that were resilient, efficient, and remarkably secretive. Hidden roads, mountain passes, forest trails, river networks, and fortresses were all integrated into a dynamic, continent-spanning network that functioned with precision. Couriers and coded messages ensured communication and coordination, while treasure and resources provided the means to act decisively. Every element was carefully designed to sustain the Order's influence while minimizing vulnerability. The Templars also leave a subtle philosophical legacy. Their ability to operate invisibly, to integrate secrecy with action, and to harmonize strategy, logistics, and human skill challenges modern assumptions about power and influence. They demonstrate that true strength is not always visible, that mastery of environment, networks, and perception can create leverage as potent as armies or wealth. Their hidden networks teach lessons in foresight, adaptability, and the careful orchestration of complex systems, principles that remain relevant across eras, from medieval warfare to modern organizational strategy. Ultimately, the story of the Templars is a story of enduring influence and inspiration. Their networks were not ephemeral. They were carefully constructed systems designed to persist, adapt, and exert influence long after the Order itself was suppressed. As we follow the traces of hidden roads, river docks, mountain trails, forest paths, fortresses, and coded messages, we glimpse an organization that achieved extraordinary coherence and reach through intelligence, discipline, and strategic vision. Their legacy is a reminder that even in the shadows of history, ingenuity, foresight, and careful planning can create systems that endure far beyond their creators. The Templars challenge us to reconsider how we view history and human potential. They invite reflection on the interplay between visibility and secrecy, action and perception, planning and adaptability. Their hidden networks, surviving traces, and enduring myths compel us to imagine a Europe threaded with invisible lines of movement, intelligence, and influence, operated with discipline and vision. In doing so, they remind us that the measure of power is not always immediate or visible. It often lies in the quiet, invisible mastery of systems, terrain, and human ingenuity. In the final analysis, the Templars' hidden networks were far more than logistical or military innovations. They were a testament to a philosophy of integration, secrecy, and foresight that transformed the way an organization could operate across continents. Their legacy continues to inspire and intrigue, urging us to look deeper, question assumptions, and appreciate the intricate, often invisible systems that shape history. It is a legacy that endures not only in stone and parchment but in the imagination, challenging us to see the hidden threads of influence that connect the past to the present, and perhaps hinting at the ways in which human ingenuity can shape the future. The Templars' final chapter is one of both mystery and enduring fascination, a testament to an order that, despite suppression and persecution, left an imprint that echoes through history. When Pope Clement V, under pressure from King Philip IV of France, officially disbanded the order in 1312, the Templars were forced into abrupt dissolution, their fortresses seized, their treasures confiscated, and their members hunted, imprisoned, or executed. Yet, this apparent eradication did not erase the ingenuity, foresight, and meticulous planning that had allowed the order to operate across Europe and the Holy Land for nearly 2 centuries. The networks they had built, hidden roads, forest paths, mountain passes, river routes, fortresses, communication systems, couriers, and treasure caches, continued to function in fragments, leaving a complex legacy that would intrigue generations to come. Even in the face of sudden and violent suppression, the Templar systems exhibited resilience. Some members went underground, carrying knowledge of hidden routes, secret caches, and coded communications with them into exile. Fortresses and castles, though seized or abandoned, often retained elements of Templar design and hidden passages, hinting at the sophisticated strategies once employed. Treasure, in many cases, vanished from official records, fueling speculation that it had been concealed, transported, or dispersed in ways that allowed the Order's influence to persist despite formal dissolution. These remnants speak to the Order's foresight in designing networks that were not dependent on a single point of control but could endure, even partially, through decentralized operation. The myths and legends that arose after the Templars' fall further enhanced their mystique. Stories of hidden treasure, sacred relics, secret knowledge, and clandestine continuities became widespread, blending historical fact with imagination. The supposed survival of certain members, the secret transmission of intelligence, and the concealment of wealth inspired countless theories and narratives that continue to captivate scholars, storytellers, and treasure hunters alike. While some of these accounts are exaggerated or speculative, they are rooted in the tangible reality of a network that had been meticulously constructed to resist exposure and adapt under pressure. The psychological and cultural impact of the Templars' disappearance cannot be overstated. Their sudden removal left a vacuum of both fear and fascination. To kings and rulers, the order's demise was a demonstration of authority, yet to the general population, it reinforced the sense that the Templars had wielded extraordinary, almost supernatural power. The memory of their operational mastery, wealth, and strategic ingenuity persisted in local legends, church architecture, and folklore, embedding their influence into the cultural and geographic landscape long after their formal suppression. Modern investigations continue to uncover traces of their enduring networks. Hidden paths through forests and mountains, abandoned fortresses, cryptic inscriptions, and remnants of river docks all offer clues to the order's operations. Historians and archaeologists piece together these fragments to better understand how a relatively small organization maintained cohesion, security, and influence over such a broad territory. Each discovery emphasizes not only the sophistication of the Templar strategies but also the resilience and adaptability that allowed elements of their network to persist despite systematic attempts at eradication. The Templars' final chapter also serves as a reflection on the nature of secrecy and power. Their ability to operate invisibly, to integrate geography, logistics, human skill, and strategic foresight into a cohesive system, and to leave enduring traces of influence demonstrates that true strength often lies not in visibility or force but in subtle mastery and preparation. The Order's dissolution underscores the vulnerability of even the most powerful organizations when political and religious forces align, yet the survival of knowledge, infrastructure, and myth reveals that their operational genius was not easily erased. Ultimately, the Templars' end highlights both loss and continuity. While the Order as an institution ceased to exist, the networks, strategies, and systems they created left a mark on history that continues to inspire curiosity, research, and imagination. The lessons of their hidden roads, couriers, fortresses, communication methods, and resource networks extend beyond medieval history, offering insights into strategic planning, resilience, and the integration of human ingenuity with environmental mastery. In the reflection of their final chapter, we see a paradox. The Templars were destroyed, yet their influence endures. Their networks were scattered, yet the ingenuity behind them persists. Their legacy invites us to question what truly defines power and survival: visibility and control, or foresight, adaptability, and the ability to leave a system so resilient that it outlives its creators. It challenges us to consider the hidden structures in our own world that shape events quietly but profoundly, just as the Templars' invisible networks once shaped medieval Europe. The final lesson of the Templars is one of enduring mystery and reflection. Their story does not conclude with suppression, loss, or disappearance. Instead, it persists in the hidden roads, the forgotten fortresses, the secret pathways, and the enduring fascination of historians and explorers. Their networks, both literal and metaphorical, continue to inspire the imagination, reminding us that the most remarkable systems of influence are often those that operate quietly, invisibly, and with extraordinary precision. Even centuries later, the Templars challenge us to see beyond the obvious, to trace hidden connections, and to appreciate the extraordinary ingenuity required to create a legacy that endures, even when the Order itself has vanished.